dear friends, colleagues, architects, congratulations to the organizer, AAK, and all the partners present. This event is part of the World Urban Campaign and the Urban Thinkers Campus to exchange on the city we need. And happy to see that the architects of Kenya are part of this conversation. You are doing a lot. This is really impressive. And I really like your theme, sustainable and just cities. This is really critical. I'd like to share a few ideas and thought on the topics. So first, we need to really be reminded that cities are the epicenters of civilization. They are hubs of innovation. They are engine of progress. But with great power comes also great responsibility. And as architects, we bear the responsibility of designing and building cities that are not only aesthetically pleasing, beautiful, but are also sustainable and just. By having this UTC on this title, sustainable and just, you are just bringing back this at the core. Sustainability is the cornerstone of our work at UN Habitat, and for you, the architects. You must design, and we must design with a deep understanding of the environmental impact of cities. Climate change is our urban and real threat, demanding our immediate attention. We must integrate sustainability principles into every aspect of our designs, from energy efficient building that utilize natural light, ventilation, green space to promote biodiversity and combat urban heat island. Our choices of material, construction method, and infrastructure should prioritize renewable resources and minimize waste generation. By adopting sustainable practices, we can create cities that harmonize with nature rather than degrade it. But sustainability is not enough. Justice also must be at the core of our endeavors. Our cities must be inclusive, fair, equitable, providing equal opportunities for all. We must tackle the persistent issues of social inequality, and this means designing neighborhoods that are accessible to people of all abilities and incomes, providing affordable housing options, ensuring that essential services like healthcare, education, public transportation are easily accessible to everyone. It means creating public space as well that foster cohesion, interaction, regardless of social background. We must strive for cities that there is no one left behind. Again, to achieve sustainable and just city, collaboration is crucial. Architects cannot work in isolation. We must actively engage with urban planners, policymakers, community members to collectively shape our cities. Participatory design processes that involve citizens and in decision-making empower them to shape their own environment, ensuring that their voices are heard and their needs are met. By embracing diverse perspectives and building strong partnership, we can create cities that truly serve the people who live in them. I think this is also the spirit of the Urban Thinkers Campus, bringing all the partners together to collectively reflect on the city we need. Also, we need to focus on education that plays a vital role in realizing sustainable and just cities. We must inspire and educate future generation of architects. And you know it is really important. We need to equip them with the knowledge and tools to integrate sustainability and justice into their design. We must encourage interdisciplinary collaboration, fostering dialogue between architects, engineers, social scientists, policymakers, and also promoting a culture of lifelong learning and innovation. We can continuously push the boundaries of sustainable and just design. To conclude, as architects and urban thinkers, we have the power to transform our cities into beacons of sustainability and justice. By embracing sustainability principles, promoting social equity, fostering collaboration, and prioritizing prioritizing education, we can shape cities that are not only beautiful, but also environmentally responsible and socially inclusive. Let us seize this opportunity to create a future where our cities are living testaments to the power of human ingenuity, compassion, and vision. Together, we need to build sustainable and just cities that serve as a testament to our commitment to a better world. UN Habitat will be at the UIA Congress soon on 2nd of July in Copenhagen. It is entitled, this Congress is entitled Leaving No One Behind. So this is, you are before this Congress, you are preparing in this UTC for the theme. And this theme is also calling for sustainable and just cities as the title of your UTC. I will participate there in Copenhagen in a session for the African architect. And I will be really happy to bring your key messages there in Copenhagen. And then at the high-level political forum in New York from the 10th of July, where we hope the voices of architects will be there and the voices of African and Kenyan architects will also be there. So I'd like to thank you, wish you a great UTC, and please share as soon as possible the conclusion of these UTCs, deliberation, and then what is your plan of action. Thank you all and have a good, fantastic UTC. Thank you, Christine. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Christine, for such a powerful keynote speech. And my takeaway was the essence of creating cities that are a testament to inclusivity and sustainability. So with that, we'll be able to then, as you have advised, to come up with an action plan from this particular UTC 8.0. At this point, I would like to welcome us to a very short recording by Maimuna on the Urban Thinkers campus, and the Secretariat is playing it. So we will pay attention for 2 minutes. In her absence, a strong message has been sent as we begin and open this Urban Thinkers campus. Thank you, Michelle. Please proceed.
Partners, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you to this Urban Thinkers campus. I would like to congratulate you for organizing this event under the banner of the World Urban Campaign. This is UN Habitat's campaign to advocate for sustainable cities and communities. We are doing this with more than 280 organizations worldwide. Under the United Nations Decade of Action, all of us have the ambition to improve living conditions in 1,000 cities that will bring positive impacts to 1 billion lives by 2030. Cities around the world are critical drivers of global changes. Cities are on the front line of mega trends such as climate change and environmental degradations, rising inequalities, housing challenge, and job insecurity. Rallying 1,000 cities around critical actions is essential to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs and the new urban agenda. We need to walk the talk. We must move together towards better cities and better life. This Urban Thinkers campus today is part of this exciting journey towards sustainable urbanization. Thank you again for joining the movement and helping us to advocate for sustainable cities and communities. Thank you. Merci. Muchas gracias. Shukran.
Thank you very much, Madam Maimuna Sharif, the Executive Director of the UN Habitat. And the message is to advocate for cities that are smart, sustainable, and just in the interest of sustainable urbanization. Thank you very much. And as we get into the thick and flesh of our call today is for us to acknowledge the audience that have joined us today. We are very grateful, and we request that you introduce yourself, continue introducing yourself on the chat box, including the organization that you're representing today and where you're tuned in from. At this point, I'd like to welcome Mark Ojal, who's the moderator for the first session, to take us into the thick and deep of it and to introduce the panelists for this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you, colleagues and friends and partners, really, for making time to be here and to set the agenda in Nairobi. I'm delighted to be moderating this session today as we look into opportunities or pathways towards sustainable, just, and sustainable and smart cities in Kenya, and not just in Kenya, but I hope that Kenya can be a springboard to looking into what Africa could look like and what the world could look like, could lead the way, essentially. Today we have a panel of 5 people. First, we have Professor Alfred Omenya, who is a sustainability expert. He's an architect, he's many things, he's a governance expert. He will be looking at the subject of pathways towards sustainable futures in Kenya in terms of challenges. Then we have Patrick Analo. I hope Patrick is here. Patrick is an urban planner, he's a senior urban planner at the Nairobi City County, the chief officer in charge of the built environment and urban planning, and also the acting county secretary. He will also be sharing innovative solutions that the city county is doing or going to do. We have Mugure Njendu, who is also an architect, always inspiring when she talks about sustainability and green solutions in the built environment. We really cannot wait to look at the way in which you can take these actions to scale. So she will be talking to us about how to take these ideas to scale. Then we have Marceline Ndado from Konza Technopolis. She will be sharing ideas, experience from Konza Technopolis. This is a live example of a smart city in Kenya. She will be sharing with us the challenges they have, the good practices they have, what are they learning, what can we improve, and all that. And then last, we have Professor Sarah Williams, who is an associate professor of technology and urban planning at MIT. She will be bringing her experience, her wealth of experience and knowledge into all things smart cities. We talk of smart cities, but what does it mean? What are the risks? How can we protect data? How can we ensure that even as we look at transition towards sustainable futures, that data protection is also key in this. The digital divide is also part of the conversation. And in the end, we are actually bringing more voices, bringing shared prosperity into cities, and not just creating fragilities, vulnerabilities, and threats. So to start us off today, I will maybe first set the agenda, building on what Christine did talk about, Christine Auclair, Florence talked about. Some of the key things they brought out are the 3 planetary crises. Pollution, in the address by Christine, in the address by Edie Maimuna. We talked of climate crisis, and we also talked about, they talked about biodiversity loss. What is our role as the built environment professionals? And to bring it now home now, closer home, is how can we take away sustainable and just and smart approaches towards this. So to start us off, I will invite Mugure Njendu to take us through what it means to urgently prioritize sustainability in order to create more resilient and equitable urban environments in Kenya. Mugure.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's really exciting to be part of this conversation. And thank you for setting the scene and just to be here with AK, UN Habitat and all our partners on this particularly really important conversation is exciting for me. So allow me to go into the subject matter. My conversation was really to sort of speak to how Kenyan cities can urgently prioritize sustainability in order to create more resilient and equitable urban environments. And I will sort of speak to this in the next 10 minutes or so in two parts. The first is really looking at the impact areas as relates to sustainability in our cities and how these sustainable principles can start addressing a more resilient and equitable urban environment. And then towards the end of my presentation, to talk to more about ways actually that this transformation can be delivered. So allow me to begin sort of talking around what equity means and what equity means in terms of our cities. And it really just implies that all groups should have access to resources and opportunities in an urban environment to improve the quality of their lives. And in terms of resilience, resilient cities really just sort of have the ability to absorb, recover, and prepare for future shocks. Maybe in terms of context, 1 in 3 urban residents globally are already underserved by their city services. That's not specific to Nairobi or Mombasa or any city in Kenya, but globally, 1 in 3 urban residents are already underserved. So this conversation in terms of equity is an urgent topic because urbanization is increasing on a yearly basis. I don't need to speak to those statistics. I believe most of those on this conversation are familiar about to those statistics. So the divide really between those who have access to services and those who do not is worsening over the years, and it's worsening due to poorly managed growth. Inequity is also really at the center of challenges in the growth of city, because although urbanization tends to grow hand in hand with job creation and growth, the distribution of these gains does tend to be uneven. So this does highlight what we're dealing with in terms of inequity in urban areas. Additionally, I'm speaking to equity and I'm speaking to resilience. With regards to really resilience, without really addressing inequities, then we do not have resilient cities. So the two go hand in hand. Inequity is required to be, equitable cities are required to be a resilient city, and resilience is required for a city to be able to address issues around equity. So I want to really address this topic in terms of how do Kenyan cities achieve this. And I'll address it using the basic principles around what a sustainable city is and how this can be achieved. We'll look at five key principles in terms of sustainability in a city. And these fall into sustainable transportation, provision of clean energy, water, reliability and conservation, urban farming, and then green spaces and green infrastructure. So speaking towards sustainable transportation, Kenya is a non-motorized country. Actually, NMT is the most widely used mode of transport. In Nairobi as a city, 45% of people walk to their daily trips. And then those who don't walk from point A to point B to their endpoint also do tend to walk to reach public transportation. So, but despite NMT really being the dominant mode of transport, it's generally the least considered in urban planning and in the investment of how we plan for transportation in our cities. So there's a need really to refocus in our city design in terms of planning, in terms of financing, in terms of advocating for policies for NMTs, and that will be the right step towards an equitable and resilient city. Additionally, where we do have vehicular transportation, it's encouraging that as a city, Nairobi is starting to think through a number of these issues. It's necessary to move to electrical vehicles and shared mobility and really make our transportation systems more sustainable and more adaptive and resilient. Lastly, in terms of planning for our transportation, prioritization of the vulnerable, children, the differently abled in our design, in our implementation of sustainable transportation, does lead to a more equitable and resilient city. The second principle is really around energy and around clean energy particularly. Energy is such a crucial element in building resilience in cities. The level and the type of energy cities use affects the economy, it affects the environment, it affects our well-being, not only just of the citizens in Nairobi or in Mombasa or any of our urban areas, but that's also of residents elsewhere, those outside of the cities as well. So I would really look at this in a couple of different ways, which is first enhancing the energy that we're currently using in terms of energy management to improve energy efficiency and to reduce energy consumption. Second is decreasing our dependency on fossil fuels. Kenya is at the forefront of transitioning to clean energy. It's quite encouraging to see the steps that we have been taking. In 2013, our renewable energy contribution to the grid was 30%. We are now at over 75%. So more and more Kenyans are being connected to energy which is clean. However, there is still a need of intervention when it comes down to the cost of energy in our cities, because that does, again, affect equity, because the cost of energy does tend to be challenging within our cities. Other areas of intervention that need to be looked at is really around household energy, particularly use of cooking fuels. Again, we do have innovations in this area in terms of clean energy for cooking, which has become a little bit more used within our cities. The use of clean energy in cities also does build resilience. That is quite evident. During a disaster, you have our interconnected infrastructure systems perhaps failing, and the more traditional energy users do fail. What does happen when you do have clean renewable energy is that those technologies through battery storage and microgrids can offer cities a stable set of solutions, and that contributes to the resilience of the city. So clean energy is one of the fundamental principles to look at when we're looking at building an equitable and resilient city. The third element would be the water supply and conservation. And really one of the key issues that impact equity in urban environments is access to clean and safe water. Just to put this into context, 60% of Nairobi residents do not have access to a reliable and safe water supply. Water and sanitation problems are not just in Nairobi, they're also in Mombasa and are common to many cities, not just in Kenya or the developing world, where water supply is unable to meet fast growing demand. For those who cannot get enough, of course, we know what happens. They rely on alternative unregulated service suppliers. Here in Nairobi, it's those big blue tanks we see, clean water. And of course, prices are much higher, which contributes to inequities, because if you cannot afford the private supply, you go without. For those with the means, also investment in storage tanks tends to happen in our cities. This again contributes to inequity, because what happens is that the wealthy and the poor, there's that gap. The wealthy will store water, and that means there will be less water supply in the mains. So without clean water, families and communities, they tend to be condemned to perpetual poverty and disease, because water supply is a basic human right. Again, in terms of equity, women and girls tend to bear the greater burden of the water crisis. Particularly if you look at the statistics from UNICEF, women and girls tend to spend about 200 million hours daily looking for water collectively across the globe. Just let me say that again, 200 million hours daily looking for water collectively. So the inequities that come about with regards to urbanization, not having access to clean and reliable water supply, cannot be overemphasized. There have been various initiatives, both from the public sector, the private sector, the World Bank, financing institutions, and the government as well, in terms of increasing water supply and conservation, and that would contribute to equitable and resilient cities in Kenya. The fourth principle would really be around urban planning. While urban planning does not offer a complete solution to food security problems, urban agriculture does have a lot of potential in terms of creating resilient communities. Urban agriculture can play a role in building more resilient communities and really enhancing food security, but also reducing our ecological footprint and contribute to city greening and water management. So that is one of the other principles that can lead to an equitable and resilient city. The last principle would really be around green spaces and green infrastructure. Urban green spaces can be a very valuable tool to level the playing field in terms of disadvantaged communities. They provide health and economic benefits, improved safety, and of course, disaster resilience. Green spaces can help to make low-income neighborhoods less vulnerable to climate and health risks, and really also help lower temperatures, improve air quality, mitigate flooding. A really great example of this is in Buenos Aires, where environmental restoration and regreening of the Lake Soldati area really prevented flood risk in low-income areas of the city. So green spaces can act as a good measure in terms of ensuring a city is equitable and resilient. I would like to close in the second part of this presentation with regards to transformation, the actual practical transformation steps that can be taken and what would perhaps have the biggest impact with regard to these 5 principles. I'll refer to the World Resources Report titled Towards a More Equal City, developed by the WRI and partners. And it really looked at 7 transformation areas. The first is infrastructure, design and delivery. And simply put, prioritize the vulnerable in infrastructure design and delivery. City infrastructure must be designed and delivered to prioritize the neglected populations. Public infrastructure for housing, water, sanitation, transport, and energy needs to meet the needs of the majority of the urban populations. Again, meeting the needs of the majority leads to increased equity. Cities that are designed for children, that are designed for the most vulnerable, are equitable cities. Secondly is in service provision models. And I know that there was one of the panelists will be speaking as well to the tech element. And this is really where in this transformation, the tech element can really impact towards more equitable and resilient cities. Service provision models really looks at cities partnering with alternative service providers. That is informal, semi-informal, or community-run alternative services. This does happen in Nairobi quite a bit in terms of water distribution, for example, Smartify that manages water meters, among others. So really looking at service provision models and leveraging on technology to be able to provide equitable services that also build resilient cities. Data collection practices is the third transformation. Data is really at the center of urban planning. But if data doesn't include the voices of vulnerable communities, planning cannot begin to address equity. So you have to have the right data to be able to deliver the right urban interventions. So improving local data through community engagement that is credible and open data, creating an opportunity to ensure that sound policies and investments better understand the impact on vulnerable communities. Good data does not need to be expensive to collect, and cities should transform data collection practices. This will improve both decision-making as well as accountability. The fourth transformation would really be around informal urban employment, recognizing and supporting that informal employment is here to stay. In the beginning, I spoke about how urbanization and job opportunities go hand in hand, but then inequities have increased in that area. But really the recognition that informal employment is here to stay. So recognizing and supporting informal workers and their economic activities that provides livelihoods for the working poor and also allows to regenerate the city's economy. And that will really benefit in boosting their well-being and boost the economic resilience of cities. Financing and subsidies is really another element of transformation, increasing investment and targeting funds innovatively towards interventions that address equity and address resilience. And then lastly, looking at urban land management, promoting transparency and integrated spatial planning, and hand in hand with governance and institutions, creating diverse coalitions. Let the people delivering policy, implementing urban interventions look like the people who are going to use these elements and consider them and allow them to be stakeholders. Diverse coalitions of public, private, grassroots, civil society really allows a shared vision to be implemented towards a more resilient and equitable city. Lastly, I just want to close that with the work it belongs to all of us. We are all stakeholders in the spaces that we live in. The city is ours, and we can deliver Kenyan cities as more equitable and resilient spaces. Thank you so much, Mark. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Muguri, really for provoking our thoughts and also sharing data that really expose or reveal stark inequalities in our cities. I didn't know that a third of urban dwellers globally do not have access to services. So I think that's really important, and as urban practitioners, we need to be alive to that. Some of the key things that you talk about in terms of principles include transport, sustainable transport, walking and cycling, of course. We do not invest in such. You also talk about electric vehicles. You also bring about the issue of resilience to disasters. I'm still waiting to actually hear whether we really do understand what's at stake as practitioners, policymakers, the different communities of practice, be it politicians, the scientific communities, the academia, practitioners in private practice and in public service. Do we really know what's at stake? When we look at what is at stake in Nairobi, do we know the everyday risk of water stress that we have? Do we know the fire risk that we have, and what urban heat island means for us in the city? And even as we talk about equity, do we know what this means to the majority of the city residents, the urban poor in particular, and what can we do? The other thing, and of course, you really bring it home when you talk about water supply and sanitation, but also on accessibility to urban basic services and infrastructure. And then you talk about also what we can take. And here I would like to invite our audience today to actually just write words there. What is your takeaway from this conversation? Can we just write, can we engage different voices in sharing feedback and all that in our chat? Let's keep talking. As we move to the next session, I would like to invite Sarah, Professor Sarah Williams. We talk of smart cities. We talk of a smart future, which is really changing the way in which we experience the city. We experience the different possibilities. We experience work and work in various places, but also in the way in which services are delivered, but also data is consumed by different actors. We also talk about the way in which the Internet of Things can change urban planning and can contribute to urban planning and even more urban management. But then, are we aware of the risks? First, would you please tell us about how we can use smart cities to revolutionize urban governance, urban planning, but also talk to us about the threats. What are the risks, and how can we ensure that the safety of data, privacy of citizens is held?
Great, Mark. Thanks so much for inviting me here today. And really interested in hearing some of the struggles that you just spoke about earlier, and honored to be on the panel with my other colleagues. I'm wondering, I'm going to share my screen for the talk today for 10 minutes, just to give us some ideas, and I'm going to go ahead and share now. So, as Mark said, I run the Civic Data Design Lab at MIT and something called the Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism. And one of the things that I think about is the massive amounts of data that we now have available for cities. And this was this video that you're seeing here is a presentation that was done on the Washington Post that just took accessible cell phone data that you can buy from a vendor. And it showed the locations of people in the White House or even in the Pentagon, right? And that, you know, even though that data might be accessible, you can actually trace people, you can see where they are. and they affect our security and privacy. So each one of us is holding a cell phone in our hands or pocket right as we speak, or right beside you on your desk. And that data, just from your cell phone existing, is being sold and monetized. And how that data is sold and monetized has an effect on our privacy. And one of the things that this article talked about is that 12 million phones, one data set, zero privacy. That, in fact, you know, you can use that to find people in the White House. You can use it to find people as they're moving through the urban environment. And that you have essentially a diary of every movement. And the crazy thing is that, in fact, we consent to being tracked when we agree to use our cell phones. And the data is not necessarily anonymous. And what I mean by that is you can see your home, you can see your work location, and then you can begin to see the different shops and stores that you go to. And one of the things that we really need to do is to create and remember that all data are people, and that we must create a code of ethics on how we use these data sets, but also ensure that the companies such as Safaricom and others are retaining and ensuring our privacy. Because on the one hand, understanding where and movements of data can help us with transportation and traffic flow, but on the other hand, can have serious harm. So one of the things that we all need to do in cities, but especially when we're working with smart cities, is create a data ethics or an ethical code of practice for working with data and data analysis. And this is something that I teach at MIT. I teach a class on data ethics for smart cities, and trying to condense that into a talk for 10 minutes was a struggle for me today. So hopefully we can have more time in the question and answer. But these are some really good resources, I think, for understanding how to create ethical practices of data. Rob Kitchen, in his book Data Revolution, talks about the ethics and structure and how we collect data, and how that data holds all of our information and creates formulas for data ethics. This book, Data and Society, I think is an excellent, really kind of guidebook for some of the issues when you're collecting data in urban environments and how to protect those people on the margins. Data Feminism by Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren Klein looks at how we can look at intersectional approaches to data. So thinking about a feminist perspective and how to retain it. And then my book called Data Action, how to use data for empowerment rather than oppression. And so when we look at data action, using data for a public good, I lay out my own ethical practices for using data. And this data action principle starts by building teams to work with data, collecting data uniquely, quantifying that data uniquely, ground truthing it, and opening it up through visualizations so that people can critique the work I do and iterate on it. The process is cyclical because we're never finished actually interpreting data. But in the book, I have data action principles. And the first one is do no harm. We must interrogate the reasons we want to use data and determine the potential for our work to do more harm than good. And so here what you're seeing is a map of Nairobi that we created of the Matatu system. And one of the things that we did is invite, as we collected this data, we invited drivers, riders to tell us whether exposing the Matatu system would do more harm than good for the city. And by incorporating the people included in data, we can understand whether the data practices might marginalize or cause issues. Here, the Matatu drivers said it was great to be visualizing this data, but there are some places in the world where exposing the Matatu system could cause certain kinds of oppressions and crackdowns on this important service. Building teams to create data narratives around data for action is essential for communicating the results effectively. What I mean here is, here's another team that I worked on in Nairobi that included computer scientists, urban planners, transportation planners, architects, graphic designers. I think by having diverse teams, we critique each other, we ask each other, what is the potential harm? So going back to the first question, but also teams make sure that we ask the right questions. What do we need to know about our city? What are the biggest problems? And, you know, data scientists might focus on the data aspects of things, but planners, transportation aspect, they really know the issues of our city. So working collaboratively, we can take the power of data science to answer really the questions of our cities. Change power dynamics. Building data helps change the power dynamics inherent in controlling and using data, while also having numerous side benefits, such as teaching data literacy. So one of the things here is, this is actually a map I created of Nairobi that shows internet access. And I got this data from Facebook by saying, we really need to know where people are not having access to internet. So kind of taking the data back from the big data companies and using it as a way to show inequity, and then forcing those in power to try to change the system. And here we use these maps to try to encourage increased data coverage and access to internet in these neighborhoods in Nairobi. Expose hidden systems. Coming up with unique ways to acquire, quantify, and model data can expose messages previously hidden from the public eye. However, we must expose those ideas ethically, going back to the first principle. So here what you're looking at is a map that we, kind of a software product that we made that exposed the zoning in New York City and helped us quantify and model that zoning patterns. We must ground truth and validate the work we do with data by literally observing the phenomenon on the ground and asking those it affects to interpret the results. So here we see kind of data visualization I used to look at the issue of ghost cities in China. And I used this visualization to work with Chinese planners to say, is this phenomenon happening? Is my model, what I'm understanding my model actually true? So there is validating your model through data, but there's actually validating your model through talking to people. And people know best the phenomenon in their neighborhood, and making sure that our quantitative models are reflective of what people know on the ground. Sharing data is essential for communicating the need for policy change and generating debate, essential for that work. And data visualizations are an effective way to do that. So you can see in a lot of the projects that I've been showing you, I have transformed data into a map or into a website. And this sharing data, not everybody can be data analysts and get into the data set, but if I can share these maps and ask people whether or not this issue rings true to them or that they believe the analysis, we know that our data, but sharing data also can push for the policy changes that we need. So sharing data about environmental issues can be very effective. And then finally, I state that you need to create your own ethical standards, and remember that data are people and we must do them no harm. We must seek to develop our own ethical standards and call on others to do the same. And, you know, while Google hired Timmy Gabru to be an outspoken critical, a critic within Google to say, what practices are we doing internally are that bad? They fired her because they couldn't follow their own ethical practices. And I think that even though we say we want to be ethical, we actually have to follow those practices and create our own graphs. And this also happened in Facebook, not just Google. there was a whistleblower on Facebook that said that Facebook is very bad for youth. But again, this woman also, her analysis was hidden. So we have to not just critique our work, but actually follow through with actions that are needed. And so I think when we look at big data science, we really need to create our own ethical standards of practice. And there is a great article called The 10 Simple Rules for Big Data Science that I would also ask everybody to take a look at. And I think I'll stop here and open it up for questions or comments, or we'll have that at the end of the panel itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you bring to light some things that oftentimes we don't talk about. You talk about the power of data in changing power dynamics, empowering communities to be able to voice their concerns, or even to hold people to account, people in power to account. I think we have a good case in Mukuru in Nairobi, and of course the Digital Matatu project that has also transformed minds and mindsets. You talk about exposing hidden systems, inequality in access to services, which again, this can be done by data. And of course, you also talk about the way in which this can help us understand the patterns of things, how you talked about internet access in Eastlands. I think that's a great example. The other thing that I think is worth highlighting is the sharing of data. Yes, we have data, then what is of use if we cannot share it? I think that's something that we have difficulties in sharing data, not only across organizations, but across departments within the same institution. So it's a challenge for us, and I hope that different actors here see the benefits or the added value of sharing data. And I wonder if you could also speak about, I think we have a few more minutes for you, and there's a question for you in the chat. Somebody from India talks about transformation of the city and how it's been used, how data has been used for various activities, including public works, infrastructure, and all that. But is curious to know more about empowering citizens and cities. Could you comment about this? How can we use data? Are there particular examples, real life examples of how cities have used data to empower citizens, but not only empowering citizens, but transform the way in which local governments provide services?
I mean, there are so many ways in which data has used to empower citizens. And maybe I'll just take from the previous talk. I think environment is a huge one. And just having access to data about environment, air quality, can really help push governments to kind of make changes. And I would say, in the case of the US anyways, and having information that the air quality was very poor helped, sorry, my computer, my internet just kind of shut off there. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. I'm back again. But just having data. So in one case, there's this new form of mining in the US called fracking, and people say that it's not causing air pollution. But these citizens actually put air quality sensors in their community and actually found elevated levels of carbon, sulfur, and particulate matter. And they were, by just taking these air models that they bought online for $250 and putting them in their community, they were able to prove, in fact, fracking does affect the air quality. And then they were able to get the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, to set some standards for these mining companies. And that transformed the air quality in their community. And these were just citizens taking their own initiative, putting air quality sensors in their community. they had the data to prove to the government that these mining companies were doing something bad. But I think there's lots of examples that we can do like this, in that, you know, we are often, you know, the government is using data to show us something, but we actually can show that back to the government to have them affect change in our communities.
Thank you for that. And maybe just one more question, and then we'll take another round later. So one more question I'm going to pose for you is on something that I have no idea what it is. Please comment on urban digital twin technology and how urban planners can leverage technology.
So digital twins are complete replicas of the city. So they are like 3D models that are made, and they're meant to do everything like experiment with transportation planning. So we can say we have a digital twin of Nairobi, and now we can simulate in that twin, like, what if we added this road, or what if we added some restrictions in, you know, even odd cars driving in Nairobi on different times of the day. So digital twins allow us to create scenarios within urban places, and then understand how actions that we take as planners might be affected. Or that's one of the case studies for urban twins. It's used by transportation planners most often. Digital twins, you know, the idea of them really started that, you know, with autonomous vehicles, they need to have a kind of picture of the city as they move through the urban environment, right? They have to know how to navigate the city through this kind of digital twin. And that's, as we start to see autonomous vehicles on the road, these kind of twins will become more prominent. I think that's probably 30 or 40 years off, people. You know, we're talking about autonomous vehicles a lot, 3 years ago. And I think the reality of the technology is still quite far, but these digital twins have still been created, and they can be used for transportation modeling and planning.
Thank you so much. I think that really helps us understand what digital twins means, and how, you know, we can use it to preempt, to visualize even different scenarios, whether it is provision of services, whether it's a response to pandemics or a response to disasters. I think we have to be prepared. The next presenter is going to share a live experience. We're going to hear first from what she sees as opportunities, challenges, but also to share with us the far they've come as Konza Technopolis. Marceline will take us through ideas, but not just ideas, but processes. Please keep your questions coming as Marceline talks. And of course, we'll bring Sarah Williams back to sort of also help us understand certain things that Marceline may be presenting and talking about, after which we'll have Professor Omenya to talk to us about why we are still slow in terms of taking such interventions to scale, and what can we do to scale up actions towards sustainable cities, towards smart cities, and justice as well. Thank you so much. Marceline.
Thank you so much, Mark. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Marceline Dado. I'm a senior urban planner at Konza Technopolis, and I'm going to take you through what you're doing in coming up with a smart and sustainable city. Konza Technopolis is a Vision 2030 project. It was actually envisioned in the Vision 2030, and we are glad that is under implementation. It is being implemented by an institution called Konza Technopolis Development Authority, which was established via legal notice number 23 of 2012. We can have a look at that. The full population, once the city is fully occupied, is around 240,000. I hope I'm not hiding you. It's a special economic zone, and of course, with best of class infrastructure and also secure and predictable investment opportunities. So I'm going to take you through a short journey of how we've managed to plan the city. In 2009, that is when it all started with a feasibility study, and a local physical development plan was prepared in 2013. But that was just a land use plan, which was not detailed at all, but just to guide general land uses in the area. In 2017, it was phased out into 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And so it was agreed that we are going to start by implementing the first phase. I'm going to talk about that. In 2021, we did a revision, but in 2022, we were able to prepare a detailed local physical and development plan for the entire Technopolis, which covers around 5,000 acres. And this year, we are working on a buffer zone plan, as you can see on my screen down here. We have actually covered quite a number of milestones, with the latest one being issuance of notice of incorporation of comments, which was done on 9th of June. And we are waiting for the 14 days period within which one can be able to appeal through the National Liaison Committee. So this is the plan for Konza Technopolis Development Authority. I'm going to be very brief. We have adopted what we call stitch and bud model. So because it was the easiest model for us to be able to phase out. This is actually the first phase, phase 1, and this is what is being implemented. But now the other phases have also taken into consideration the existing land uses. So these are the bands that we are talking about. That is from north to south, and from east to west, we have the stitches. Let me just move forward because I have a land use. I have a land use budget. This is going to inform us what you're planned for in the plan. So among the land uses that we have is a comprehensive city with the residential areas, with educational facilities, from nursery all the way to university. I'll be talking about a university that is currently under construction. Public purpose, we have hospitals, police posts, we have fire stations and other public purpose land uses. We have recreational facilities. We have a nature park, which is around 200 acres. Actually, the nature park is not going to be developed. In future, when you come to Konza and the city is already operational, you'll be able to tell how was the city before developments took place. We have numerous pocket parks. We have a sports stadium, which will be built to FIFA standards. We have botanical gardens, arboretums, playfields, and bicycle tracks. Actually, we say in Konza Technopolis is a city where you can live, work, and play. And playing, look at the amount of land use that have allocated to both conservation and recreation is a lot of land, over 1,000 acres, and yet we are only 5,000 acres at Konza Technopolis. Of course, we also have other land uses, agricultural. We are practicing urban agriculture. We have transport. On transport, we have 3 hierarchies. We have 60-meter roads, which we call it Green Transit Corridor, 40-meter roads, and also a 20-meter road. If I can just take you back, I want to show you, these are the 60-meter roads. This one will just host the BRT. We are really trying to make the city highly non-motorized if possible, and we are promoting pedestrianization. Remember, for a smart and sustainable city, especially on sustainability, you have to reduce use of motorized transport because of emissions of carbon dioxide and other gases and other greenhouse gases. Then the 40-meter roads are the major trunks. They actually carry all the utilities. I'll be talking about the utility tunnels that are carrying our services. They run along the 40-meter roads. So for all the 3 phases, we have 3 pairs of 40-meter roads and also the 60-meter roads. Then the rest of the roads are 40-meter roads. Let me just proceed. So we have, this is the buffer zone plan, just to mention about it. It covers, we realize that if we just develop, we develop the smart city without controlling what is happening outside, we'll have a very, very beautiful and well-planned city with all the facilities, but the neighborhood, maybe we have slums, there's no water, there's no electricity. So Konza lobbied, actually brought together the 3 counties of Machakos, Makueni, and Kajiado, together with the Ministry of Lands, Ministry of Tourism, and we were able to sit to constitute a planning team, and sit together and prepare the plan, which I already mentioned. It covers 10 kilometers radius from the boundary of the Technopolis. Now you will ask me, how do we implement our plan? We have tools that we've come up with. Remember, being the first smart city, we don't have enough legal and policy framework. And this is one of the challenges that we are facing. So we need to come up with additional tools. Of course, we are guided by PULPA, that is the Physical and Land Use Planning Act, but we also came up with our own internal policy and also what we call the Physical Development Code, which contains standardized requirements for design. So as you design, as an investor, when you come to us, I'll be talking about how you can come to us. You have, as you develop, you have to follow our standards that we have laid. For instance, when it comes to maybe housing, when you're coming up with your development, it has to be green certified. That's a standard that you have to observe. We also have what we call parcel register and parcel allocation worksheets. So among the guidelines that we have, the guidelines have been summarized in the code. We have sustainability guidelines, we have public housing guidelines, infrastructure, social, and all those. What is in red, I'm yet to develop, but it is work in progress. I started by saying that we're implementing only the first phase. The first phase was initially only for 410 acres with all those land uses. I don't have to mention them as well as some public housing. I'll be talking about our office where we are sitting. I'll show you in the photos. And we also have 1,000 acres, which is not captured here, dedicated for the wildlife. Perhaps I should have shown you in the plan. Yes, sorry. But yeah, I don't know, it's running so fast, I'm sorry. So this is the 1,000 acres that I'm talking about to the southern part of the Technopolis. This area is habited by several wildlife. And so as we were doing the strategic and environmental assessment, NEMA gave it as a condition that we have to reserve some space for the wildlife. So we have several wildlife on the site, and so we have to plan for them as well. So phase 1, once it is done, it will have a total of 1.5 square meters of built up space with 17,000 workers and around 30,000 residents. Parcel uptake up to now is at around 90% for the first phase, and that's why we aim to move fast and plan for phase 2 and phase 3. The survey works are ongoing. We have the smart cities facilities being done. I'll be talking about components of smart city and what we are doing, but among them, the integrated operation center and the intelligent transport system are around 50% done. Now, let me show you what we are doing on the projects. This is the Konza office block. We call it Konza Complex. That's where our headquarters are. We are located around 60 kilometers from Nairobi, along Mombasa Road, near a place called Malili. For our solid waste, we are not going to have the open collection of solid waste, but you're going to use a vacuum, an automatic solid waste system, which is vacuum. So you just insert segregated waste on these collection areas, which have already been done. You can see these are real picture. And then the waste is suctioned by vacuum to a common collection center, which we have provided for, and construction is ongoing. So from the collection center now, the waste can be loaded on trucks for recycling or for incineration. We have provided for a waste to energy center, where waste that cannot be recycled or reused will be burnt to produce energy, and this energy will be fed into the grid. This is one of the substations that we are doing. We have a 66 kV, but we also have Ketraco doing 400 kV. And down here is a smart pole. This is what makes Konza a smart city, part of what makes Konza a smart city. So we have normal street lights, like what you can see in red, but we have smart poles. And a smart pole has several components. It has environmental sensors. It has help button in case you are stranded and you need the police to assist. You can just press a button and you can call and actually talk to the command center. We have a normal lighting up here. We have CCTV cameras for security purposes. We have Wi-Fi, and we also have a digital display where city information can be displayed, or we can even commercialize it. so that you can have adverts running just like the normal billboards. So on the projects that we are doing, we have for phase one, horizontal infrastructure, we are at 88%. I'm going to show you a video. We are doing also a conference facility. If you noted, my first slide had some building like that looks like KICC. That's our conference facility. It's at around 59% complete. We're also doing furnished apartments. Fittings are being done as we speak. Then we also have a data center, which is already operational. We are hosting several government institutions and also public. We're also doing a public safety center, which has a fire station and also a police station, as well as a command center. Other projects that are being done, you can see them on my screen, but I want to mention of a university called Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. It's a sister university to Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. It's actually being done at Konza, and we are around 20% complete. And of interest is that NEMA is also doing an e-waste management at Konza Technopolis. Being a Technopolis, we expect a lot of e-waste. And so how to handle them? We have onboarded NEMA as one of our investors, and they're doing a management center for e-waste. This is an aerial photo of our streetscape. This is the green transit corridor I was talking about. You see it is looping. It is just a monodirectional, the traffic will be monodirectional. And I said it will just be hosting the BRT only, but other vehicles will be accommodated in other roads. This is the Auto Boulevard. I hope what we are doing looks like what you saw in the plan. So you realize that all our parcels have roads around them. I'll be talking about this and why we aim to do that. We also have, these are electrical cabins where you can tap your electricity from. Remember, all our utilities are inside a utility tunnel. The utility tunnel, this is an example. It's actually an image of the utility tunnel. It has all the utilities apart from stormwater and wastewater because of ease of contamination of the potable water. So we have potable water, we have irrigation water. This is the water reclamation facility. Let me talk about where the irrigation water is coming from. This is the water reclamation facility. This is the water treatment plant. Now this is like a sewer plant, and we'll be treating our water up to drinking standards. Now the water that has been treated is what we are calling irrigation water, which will be transported to all the parcels for irrigation purposes. Remember, all our services are underground, and so there's no cutting of roads for you to connect a new user or something of the sort. The water treatment plant will be treating water from our 3 sources. We have 5 boreholes at the site. That is what you're using now. We have connection to Nolturesh. That is water from Mount Kilimanjaro, and we're also expecting water from Thwake. The water from Thwake, 70% will be used in the city and 30% will be supplied to the buffer zone. These are some of the projects that we are having at the site. I don't have to go through them in the interest of time. Now let's talk about sustainable and smart city development. How are we doing it? First of all, let me talk about our key programs or our key pillars as a smart city. We are more towards ICT related projects, life sciences, including research centers, biotechnology, medicine. Actually, we have several hospitals coming up, including an oncology specialist hospital and also engineering. So those are the 3 clusters that the city is planned towards. So this is the data center I was talking about, and these are the services that we host, among them cloud virtual services, IoT, that is Internet of Things, and the smart city facilities, as well as innovation, research and development. Now, what is a smart city? A smart city has 6 components: smart governance, smart mobility, smart people, smart economy, smart environment, and smart living. So for Konza, what are we doing to achieve smartness? Under smart governance, we are looking into innovation, financing, policy and legal framework, capacity building. And when it comes to smart governance, you also talk about maybe revenue connection and things like that, that can be enabled by using technology. Remember, smartness means you are leveraging on technology to run the city or to provide services to the city. When it comes to smart mobility, we have planned our city in a way that within 500 meters, you can be able to access all the services that you need. And that's why our that's why we call it a 15-minute city. Within 15 minutes, you can we give an example of you come from home with your child, you're holding your child, you drop the child at the daycare, you go to work. From the work, you can pick your child, pass through the market, and go home without needing a car. So it's a highly walkable city. On smart people, of course, we are ensuring that the city is highly walkable. Remember, I have said our parcels have 4 roads around this parcel, making it highly walkable, and also you can use the bikes or scooters. On smart environment, I talked about smart green buildings. It's a requirement here in Konza. And we're working closely with Kenya Green Building Society for EDGE certification, but you also allow LEED and Green Star. Use of green energy, green urban planning, we have provided many green spaces and so on and so forth. For smart living, we've provided ample green spaces and also habitable environment. And we have provided for many others that I may not be able to talk about in the interest of time. So when it comes to sustainability, we understand sustainability around 3 pillars: the social sustainability, environmental, and also economic sustainability. In Konza, under social, we promote improved living standards for its residents. Remember, we are talking about also just cities. All the residents have access, actually equal access to all these smart facilities that we are talking about. Whether you are living in the affordable housing or whether you are living in the IED, we have a low density area which has the smallest parcels, measuring half an acre, but just to allow for a single dwelling. So whether you are living there or you are living in the affordable housing that we are working with the Ministry of Housing, you still have access to the same services. The city of PWDs, people living with disabilities, children, pregnant mothers. To Kompakana, we also have, sorry, I'm almost spoke Kiswahili. We have also provided for elderly, nursing homes for the elderly in the city. So we are very, very inclusive, and I believe we are a perfect example of a just city. On environmental sustainability, I won't repeat myself. I've talked about how we ensure sustainability. Of course, reduction of greenhouse gases and things related to the same, as well as promoting efficient use of resources in terms of economic sustainability. Now, you will ask me, what are the challenges that we face? Because, of course, in as much as I've talked about many things that we are doing, we are facing challenges such as lack of smart city legal and policy framework. And I think AAK can assist us together with other professional bodies to come up with an act of parliament, if possible, to get on smart city development, because actually that's where we are moving towards. Machakos is planning to do a new city that is supposed to be smart as well. Eldoret is doing the same. As we do this, what legal and policy framework will be guiding us? As Konza, we have tried to come up with our own code, but we can gazette them so that they can be used by any other city that wants to implement the same. So other challenges include, of course, financial resources. Remember, the cost of that infrastructure is very, very expensive. For phase 1 alone, we are spending more than 41 billion. Of course, the wide range of stakeholders that we have to engage. Privacy concerns, of course, previous presenters have talked about data, and smart city is about data, leveraging of data, ease of sharing data. But as we share data and all those, then there are privacy concerns. Then we also have cyber security concerns like cyber crime and also cyberbullying, also potential of incompatible land uses, especially in the buffer zone. But I'm glad because you're doing something together with the counties so that we are at least in control of what happens in the buffer zone, and also lack of IT skills amongst the end users, especially our investors. Like now, if you come to Konza, you need a parcel allocated to you, you have to do your application online. So some of the investors are not IT. They are not very good, and so they have to go for consultants so that they can assist them. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing. And now I'm going to show you a video of what we are doing at the Technopolis so that you can appreciate. Looking into it, ICN is a company that is doing our horizontal infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, the ICT. As I said, we have several animals on site. You can see them. This is our office, Konza Complex building. We have wildebeests. We have these beautiful birds. We have, I'm not so sure of the name of this animal. We have zebras. And there are several of them at the site. And as I started, I was saying that we have set aside around 1,000 acres for our animals. We're going to do a haha wall that is going to separate the city from the animals. Now, this is the city, the road network, the green transit corridor that I was talking about, the auto boulevard, and also the local roads. This is our building, and this is the conference facility that is under construction with a capacity of around 1,300 people. So these are normal street lights. You can see we have already installed them. And we also have the smart poles that I already talked about. Sorry. Yeah. So you can see each parcel is surrounded by a road. These are smart pole and these are the normal street lighting. We have also installed traffic lights. You can see them on the main junctions. That's the city. Those of you who think there's nothing happening, it's because what you're doing is horizontal development. Is a public safety center. I talked about the police station and the fire station. This is where the development is taking place. This is what the furnished apartment for our visitors. In case you come and you need to maybe you need accommodation, you can be accommodated there. This is one of the ponds that are being done to collect storm water, and that water will be used either for irrigation or to water the animals. This was in January. A lot of work has already taken place, but unfortunately we don't have a recent video. Actually, this project is at 88% complete. By the end of the year, we should be done. This is an athletics field that is being done just next to the university, the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. I already mentioned it. This is the university, actually. This is the parcel with the university. It's unfortunate we can't see the university building very well. Then this, the DS2 is a 66 kV power substation. We'll be receiving power from Ketraco. Ketraco is being 400 kV substation in the wildlife corridor. Then they'll step down to 132 and to 66. And then apart from this, we are provided for 6 other substations for different land uses. So this is the water reclamation facility. In Kenya, we call it sewer treatment plant. But these are smart one. I said we'll be treating water up to drinking standards, but that water will be used for irrigation. Actually, it's a requirement that for our investors, 10% of your parcel has to be landscaped. And you have no excuse because we are providing water. So this is the water treatment plant to treat clean water, that is potable water, from the 3 sources that I already mentioned. Please note that the 2 facilities are adequate to serve the entire Technopolis. That is both phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. What we'll do, we'll just expand the number of tanks, the number of ponds that are required, but the space is enough and adequate to serve the entire population. Yeah, that's still the treatment plant for clean water. And that is the end of the video and also the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Marcin, for a really brilliant presentation. I think it's a good example of a smart city in Kenya that maybe needs to be taken to scale. It also really raises lots of questions, I think, are coming from audiences. But I will start them off. So a few things that you mentioned which intrigue me. So from the planning to implementation, I'm wondering what is the place of urban design in this, and urban design as a discipline is mentioned or was inspired by Vision 2030, as well as smart cities like Konza. How are you intentionally bringing in urban design practice, the students? Are you building capacity? Secondly, I think we've talked about transdisciplinarity, and you started talking about this. You talked about the Institute of Engineering. But then I'm wondering, the city is really not just a physical infrastructure, but it's not, and again, it's not only about a network of systems, but it's many things beyond that. How is Konza also enhancing transdisciplinary collaborations? How is it challenging the status quo? Is it inspiring a way of work that's different through collaborations between engineering, planners like you, people in water, people in education sector? So those, I would stop there for now. Of course, I have some, but we'll also pick from presentations that we have, questions that we have on chat, on especially on equity. But sorry that.
Okay, Mark, please guide me. Do I respond to your two questions and then you can be reading for me what is in the chat as I respond?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you so much. So on urban designers, I'm happy to say 2 of my staff under me are urban designers. And as we were working on the phase 2 and phase 3 plan, they were part of the team. Actually, you'll be surprised, the 2 of them are the researchers in the department. So they will tell us, okay, planners, this is what you want to do, but you can make it look better in this manner, especially during the planning stage. The planning, we apart from ourselves, the internal capacity, we also had planners and environmentalists from the Ministry of Lands. And so I can say ours was a multidisciplinary team that prepared the team, including the planners, the engineers, the environmentalists, and also the surveyors. I also have several surveyors in my department. So you talked about, now let me jump to transdisciplinary collaboration. And I'm happy because actually the planners from the Ministry of Lands were telling me, you see, we usually do planning, but you've never seen this multidisciplinary approach. Because when they came to us, they realized we have engineers, we have streetscape engineer, we have water engineer, we have electricity engineer, we have QSs, we have valuers, we have property managers who are also valuers, and all of them were part of the team. Part of the planning team. So as we were planning for the Ministry of Lands team, they said it was very exciting because they have to go looking for figures, how much water do you need? But for us, we had a water engineer. So water engineer says estimated maybe water demand per person per day is this much. So can you plan for that? So we work like that in as much as the engineers are in a different department, but we work together. And even now, as we speak, I'm in Kiambu, we are working with the engineers to come up with future requirements for water, ICT, electricity, and all the requirements in phase 2 and phase 3, because what we have provided for is only phase 1. And now that we are about to start implementing the 2 phases, we are to come together and establish and come up with the requirements. So we are actually working together. What we do as planners informs what the engineers do, informs what the environmentalists do. So I think with that, we are a perfect example, and like maybe other planning authorities that have only planners and they don't have other disciplines represented. Thank you. Any other question?
Thank you. Yes, there are series for you. Rose Muema, whom you may know, is asking a question about Fiscal and Land Use, I think, Act of 2017, and wondering how the plan, which was prepared earlier, responds to this policy and act.
All right, Rose, the Physical Land Use Planning Act was enacted in 2019, actually, not 2017. But there before, there was a Physical Planning Act of 1996, Cap 286. So the initial planning, which was done in 2013, was done actually by the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning. And so they definitely applied what the law was saying. When the 2019 Act came into, when it was enacted, we are glad because, of course, it also took into consideration the provisions of the PPA. We used to call it PPA. And the initial plan having taken into account the provisions of the PPA, then I can say we are actually not off what PULPA provides for. But we found ourselves in a very awkward situation because the buffer zone plan that I was talking about, there was an initial plan that was prepared in 2013. And I believe now this is how Rose maybe perceived it. When it was prepared in 2013, devolution had not kicked in. And at that time, the implementation agency for any planning and implementation was the National Director of Physical Planning. But immediately after the after the plan was prepared, devolution kicked in. And remember, the buffer zone plan is a regional plan. By then it was called a regional plan, but now it is there was no institutional framework to implement the plan. And so that plan was actually not implemented at all until when we came in. I hope you can still hear me. I can see my network is not stable. Until when we came in 2020 and now initiated talks and we did an MOU, and finally we are now, can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I thought I'm not audible. So we are now preparing a buffer zone plan under the provisions of PULPA, which is guiding very well on Land Use Planning Act and other acts.
Yes, I'm just being corrected that the question was actually in compliance to or directed towards understanding the way in which the Konza City Plan responds to the 2017 land use plan, physical land use plan of 2017, the development. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we are not talking about the act. So
Yeah.
Maybe you can allow me to reshare my screen once again, because I want to show you. So this is where's the 2017 plan? This is the 2017 plan. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, and it was still planned along the stitch and bird model that I'm talking about. And for sure, I wish I could be able to expand my screen. I think you can be able to see. These are the roads. I talked about the green transit corridor. I talked about the auto boulevard. I talked about all the parcels being surrounded by road network. Now, if you look at this image here, I'm trying to scroll. I think I've not zoomed enough. If you look at this image here, this image, let me remove this. You can see actually this is exactly what is in the plan. You can see the green transit corridor. You can see the auto boulevard. You can see the roads as it was planned. I'm actually so excited because initially I was working at the Ministry of Lands and we just used to prepare so many plans, never see them implemented. But here we have a plan, we have what is implemented. And if you look at them, you hold your plan on this hand and what is implemented on this other hand, they speak to one another. So I can say the plan is actually responding to what was planned. However, during design, of course, there are several or some variations that engineers may make, maybe if it doesn't make sense, but very, very minimal, but within the provided space. So for the planners, we are covered, but for engineers, the initial designs, you may find that they are not exactly as built because maybe there are some variations that was done during implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now two more fundamental questions. And at this point, allow me to bring back Sarah, again, based on this presentation, and please do feel welcome to also respond to this, Marceline. The question of digital divide and exclusion is one thing that manifests itself when it comes to smart cities. How can we ensure that no one is left behind? And Sarah, you have listened to this presentation. Of course, you've also heard what Marceline has talked about, what is going well and also challenges. What do you think can be done to ensure that we bridge the digital divide and we actually ensure that we bring us more people to experience this project?
Maybe, can I go first?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mark. This is not part of planning, but it's part of what you're doing in Konza to ensure that we close that digital divide. Konza has launched a project called Jitume program. You can go to our website, it's konza.go.ke, where Konza is collaborating, Konza through Ministry of ICT, we are under Ministry of ICT, by the way. So Konza is collaborating with county governments to set up labs, computer labs, in for the first phase, 2 TVETs for every county. That is TVETs, this Technical Training Institute in TVETs, 2 TVETs per county, where people or students are trained for free. And they are trained actually on digital issues and also how to make money, how to create jobs through digital platforms. And that one is already running. So I can say it has picked up very well. For the first phase, we are doing only 2 labs per county, but eventually we are going to expand it. And we believe this is making impact on our people. We also have on innovation, we also have, what are they called? I'll remember. We create platforms where even the youngsters come to Konza and they're trained on programming activities and such IT-related activities. So we are trying. We are really trying. Thank you.
Yeah, Sarah, would you mind stepping in and, of course, reflecting on your earlier points about changing power dynamics, building teams, sharing of data? How do you see this?
Thanks so much for your presentation of this new city. And I think it's super interesting to see what it will look like in the future. I think that when we talk about making the city available to everyone, we're thinking about all socio-demographic classes. And I guess one question I have for Kwanzaa is, how will lower income people be included into this community? Is this community only for wealthy or higher income people? And the reason I ask this question is because we need all kinds of services, like those that are coming from all walks of life. And so this city seems that it's only for like higher income people, or like how will we include multiple income classes in this city?
That's a tough one. I don't know if Maslin, you can proceed. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Konza is not only for the wealthy. We have provided for, I started by mentioning that we are working with the Ministry of Housing to work on affordable housing. So we have, we can accommodate even those who are not earning so much. And in the streets, especially the Green Transit Corridor, there are even kiosks, provisions for these smart kiosks for those small traders, corner shops for the small traders, you know, provision for even people from the buffer zone to get into the city, work, and also go back there in case the city is, the affordable houses in the city are not as affordable as we think. But we are intentional to ensure that we are inclusive to all categories. And that's why we are really trying to ensure that even the Technopolis and the buffer zone are at least at par in terms of the developments that are being done. So we are taking into account the laborers, the workers, the CEOs, and all that. I know in developed countries, we have the low earning people in there, maybe living in the ground floor, and maybe the richest ones on the penthouses and things like that. And we are also trying to do the same. Actually, when it comes to costing of the parcels in Konza, parcels like the low density parcels are more expensive than high density parcels. And that means during development, then during development and also implementation, then the people living in the high density area are at least taken care of. Yeah, it's not as expensive as people who can be able to maybe pay more or who need their own privacy, and so they need their own spaces. So yeah, that's how we are trying to be a bit inclusive. But Sarah, if you have other maybe other proposals on how we can make the city more inclusive, I would be glad to listen in and also to advise the authority. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maslin. We are running short of time, but I'm told that there's someone with a hand up. I can't see the hand, but if you have your hand up, please. Marco Caroline. Marco. I'm not sure if Marco is still in here.
Please unmute and speak, Marco.
Okay, we will skip that for now, but one last question, then we close, the very, very last. It's around data collection. Somebody has asked 2 questions now, and of course, we understand that this is a greenfield development, so it's not so easy to involve citizens to contribute to something that they have not experienced yet. But from your experience, and of course, also borrowing from Sarah's experience, how can citizens help create models that highlight whatever issues and provide feedback? I mean, I think we talked about digital twinning. Are these being simulated? Is even risk and the way in which people would respond if there's a disaster or something being brought into this kind of process? What is the place of people in data collection, essentially?
I mean, I think I can take this on. I was thinking, like, if as it relates to Kwanzaa or to Kenya overall, is that question for Kwanzaa or for Kenya or in
For
general?
Kwanzaa.
For Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenge with Kwanzaa, and I'm sure that the presenter, Marceline, knows this, is that when we take a greenfield development and we build it anew, how do we create like a lively, active, vibrant city? And one of the things that we love about city life is people on the streets, the markets, the kind of enjoyment of this. So I think one thing that's going to be really important in terms of thinking about data collection as the city comes online is what activities are creating those kinds of vibrant intersections between people and place and shopping, right? This is why we like to go downtown, right, to the mall or other places, is this ability to interact. And so I think data collection on how we are using Kwanzaa is going to be super important for its success. And because it's a little bit different. But I do think, measuring how like a center like that creates activity too. How many people are coming per day and where are they coming from will be important for kind of changing the dimensions of the city itself. So I think one thing though that Kwanzaa needs to also be concerned with. So one, is the city fun? Can we use data to actually kind of check out those kind of dimensions of interaction and play that can be produced in the city? But another thing is, as Kwanzaa comes online, are using that data to understand energy, carbon, water use, and to look at sustainability issues is going to be a big thing that Kwanzaa can measure. So, by creating a new city online from the start, right, we're creating new advances in water technology, treatment, carbon. And can we see carbon reduction in the use, or can we see reduction in energy? And energy is kind of the biggest issue that we need to be considering, as well as water. And how does Kwanzaa help kind of support that? That data is going to be important for showing how a city like this can be more efficient in the use of those vis-a-vis other kinds of places. But I do think, like, when we look at smart cities, like, there are kind of key examples. Like, one is in Korea called Sango, and it created a very similar product to Kwanzaa, like, except for people didn't like going there. So I think that's also going to be a big struggle. How can you activate the place? And I think using data can help us understand that question. Both sustainability side, like, we can say lots of measurements, but how do we make it a place people want to be at, right? And I think that data should be used in that way as well.
Thank you so much, everybody. I have to stop this here, unfortunately. I mean, it's a very interesting conversation. I'm not sure whether, I think I'll give you, Maslin, a minute to, just 30 seconds really, to close down, to wind up. But I think the key message here today and the biggest challenge that we face today is to answer the question of equity. Where does it fit? How does it fit? And again, one key takeaway, one thing that has, of course, run through the whole session and is coming out even now is that people have to be at the center of any sustainable solutions. If we are really to achieve this, technology will not help us. Actually, maybe it raises more questions than answers. So just closing remarks, and then, we can close this, we can revisit this conversation, we can take this conversation on Twitter, on Instagram, everywhere, and you can keep the conversation alive.
All right, Mark, I wish I had some more time. I said, if you want to know what is happening in the Technopolis, please give me a whole day. And but maybe for students who are here, I would like to mention to differentiate between greenfield development and brownfield. Brownfield planning is where you are planning for an existing town like Nairobi is, and you're trying to plan it, maybe to replan, make it more smart, or maybe make it more sustainable. But for greenfield like Konza, we're starting from zero, scratch. Nothing was there, just grass. So on the activities, on the vibrancy of the city, we provided for areas with shopping malls. But the most interesting one that I like giving example is along the green transit corridor. It is landscaped with public furniture. And remember, I said there is Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi that is free everywhere. And in the landscaped gardens, there are lights. I'm told those lights at night, they'll be changing colors to romantic colors like blue, so you can really look forward to having an evening, maybe sit or talk with your colleague along the green transit corridor. And I believe this is one of the most exciting things that the city is doing. On Konza being the city, it's actually a CBD to the buffer zone. That's why we had to plan the area to make it something close to a metropolitan. So definitely the way everybody will come from Westlands, from Kitengela to Nairobi CBD, that's the same situation that we're envisioning with Konza Technopolis as a city, given with its surrounding, which is now the buffer zone, which is the larger metropolitan area. On the data, we are using sensors, energy. We're using energy sensors. What do I call them? Or those lights that can only maybe light when there is some movement or somebody walk into the room. We are using water sensors to detect whether there any leakage or something of the sort. And also because Konza has a lot of grass, we also have fire sensors, especially in the wildlife corridor and in the nature park, so that in case there is any smoke, information is sent, real-time data to enable the city management to take appropriate action. Otherwise, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to Konza Technopolis. Kindly create time, give me a call. Maybe Mark, I'll share my contact later, and come and see what we are doing, especially for students or practitioners in the urban planning sector. Kindly pay us a visit. And Dr. Sarah, thank you. See you again.
Thank you, everybody. This was amazing. This was great. And I think it really provides us with insights, but also challenges us to engage differently, engage deeper, and really looking forward to taking this conversation forward. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, team. Those were insightful conversations. We join again in the next 5 minutes for us to begin session 2. Thank you very much. Stay tuned, please.
Professionals of the built environment, welcome to the IFLA World Congress 2023 8th IFLA Africa Symposium and AAK Annual Convention 2023. The joint hybrid event will be held at the Safari Park Hotel, Nairobi on September 28th to 29th, 2023. The event will be hosted by the Architectural Association of Kenya AAK in Nairobi and Architects Sweden in Stockholm. Theme: Imagined Interaction. Attend and earn CPD points from Borax and EBK. Engage in 2 days of industry-leading networking, dynamic group discussions, stimulating breakout sessions, and an innovations showcase featuring the best in the industry. Also, experience an interesting blend of social events. To register, visit www.ifla2023.com. Registration is now open. Karibuni, Nairobi.
Partners, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you to this Urban Thinkers Campus. I would like to congratulate you for organizing this event under the banner of the World Urban Campaign. This is UN Habitat's campaign to advocate for sustainable cities and communities. We are doing this with more than 280 organizations worldwide. Under the United Nations Decade of Action, all of us have the ambition to improve living conditions in 1,000 cities that will bring positive impacts to 1 billion lives by 2030. Cities around the world are critical drivers of global changes. Cities are on the front line of mega trends such as climate change and environmental degradations, rising inequalities, housing challenge, and job insecurity. Rallying 1,000 cities around critical actions is essential to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs and the new urban agenda. We need to walk the talk. We must move together towards better cities and better life. This Urban Thinkers Campus today is part of this exciting journey towards sustainable urbanization. Thank you again for joining the movement and helping us to advocate for sustainable cities and communities. Thank you. Merci. Muchas gracias. Shukran.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second session of the Urban Thinkers Campus 8.0, organized by the Architectural Association of Kenya and specifically coordinated by the Town Planners Chapter. With you this afternoon is myself, Christine Mushiri, a planner and environmental consultant or a specialized expert in environment and urban planning. And in this session, we are going to look at equity and inclusion in our cities. We've come from a very exciting session where we were looking at sustainable and just cities. And in this session, we are joined by a team of great panelists with very specialized areas of professional expertise, including areas of the differences that we observe in our cities in terms of age, in terms of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic positioning. So we are going to hear from them how they envision our cities as being equitable and just. And coming from the conversation on what the Urban Thinkers looks like or where it emanated from, and it is an initiative of the United Nations Habitats World Urban Campaign, which was conceived in 2014 as an open space for critical exchange between all stakeholders and partners, and it aims at promoting sustainable urbanization. And it also aims at creating a platform to advocate for enlightened urban planning and design for our cities and to propose urban solutions in addressing urbanization challenges of the future. So how do we view our cities? Our cities are premised under different dynamics, and we appreciate the fact that the basic proposition of our cities is that it is a site or a site of social differences. And as mentioned, the differences would include, but they're not limited to, the ability to status, age, class, citizenship, ethnicity, gender, race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic positioning. And these differences majorly are social constructs, but then they are highly influenced by how we do our planning policies, how we engage urban governance, and how we design our cities. So for this conversation, we are joined by the following panelists. We have Titus Kaloki, and you can unmute and turn on your camera and say hi to the audience as I introduce you briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine. To all participants, thank you for joining. I'm Titus Kaloki from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, working on the Just Cities project.
All right, thank you very much, Titus. We're also joined by Joy Mboya. Joy Mboya, you can unmute and turn on your camera, please. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm with the Godan Arts Center, and wonderful to be in this conversation. Thank you.
Happy to have you too. And we also have Jack Campbell.
Hi, everyone. Yeah. So I work for KDI, Kunkui Design Initiative. Great to be here. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. We also have Tom Cotright. Tom, if you're in the room, kindly say hello to the participants.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're able to hear me. So it's great to be here. My name is Tom Cotright. I wear many hats, but I run the Lubyanza Research Group on Boda Bodas in Uganda.
All right, there we are with our rich cherry-picked list of panelists. I'll begin with a question posed to Titus Kaloki to be able to unravel the concept of equity and inclusion. So Titus, to you, what is a just city and how does it relate to being part of smart and sustainable? And with that, you can also guide us in understanding the concept of equity. What does it mean to have smart, sustainable, and just cities, and how can we measure this? Over to you, Titus.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I will pick it from something you just mentioned. Whose cities or for whom do we build these cities? And I think this question is very important at the macro level because it speaks to issues around citizenship. It talks about belonging. It talks about identity. And therefore, in the previous session, I could hear some people struggling to find themselves within the Konza realm because probably these questions were not being answered correctly. And for us to be just, we must first ask ourselves at the macro level that question. Once we have asked that at the mid-level or the meso level, it's important to then ask what kind of cities will this be? Now we know who they are for, but what kind? And this is where we make distinctions between just cities, smart cities, green cities, sustainable cities, and all these conceptualizations that try to define or to describe what kind of a city this is. For a just city, in the way we conceptualize it, we are guided by principles, by values. And basically we have 4 values quickly. Dignity, because if you want to achieve inclusive and you want to achieve equitable cities, then you must think, how do I dignify the people who will be living in this city? How do I avoid them not having a toilet? How do I avoid giving people a house where teenagers and parents share a space? Then the second one would be equity and diversity. And here equity is closely linked to diversity because one defines the other or has an impact on the other. And therefore, the way we understand equity would be many people in the urban areas are actually urban invisibles. By this, I mean children, elderly, youth, persons living with disabilities, and even women. They are mostly not recognized and not heard, and they not be facilitated to participate in shaping urbanization processes. So built environment professionals might design with the business in mind, with the elite, the able-bodied, but these urban invisibles rarely get an opportunity to have their specific needs, which are diverse, responded to. And therefore, if that happens, where you respond to specific diverse needs, then you can realize equity. The third is rights and responsibilities. And here we say people have the right to the city. And this answers the question of inclusion. Inclusion can be looked at from an economic perspective. Does the city create opportunities for jobs and entrepreneurship? It can be seen from a social perspective. Is public participation, are voices being heard? Do they shape and influence how the city is planned and the projects that are done? And the third one is you can look at it from a spatial perspective. This means, do we balance how we spread these projects, how we plan? Because the city doesn't always grow at the same time in all its spaces. Some people are confined to very small spaces where they live in informality, while others have so huge spaces where they can enjoy all these other things that make cities just. And finally, we have the democracy as a principle. And if a city is democratic, then it will harness, for example, smart technologies to be able to map its citizens, their needs, provide platforms for them to participate and shape urbanization plans and projects. It could also enable sustainability because it would allow for the knowledge exchange on locally led actions that lead to sustainability. It would allow both bottom up and top down interaction of ideas and knowledge, and this ultimately will result in more sustainable solutions. So in a nutshell, I would say principles or values are very important when you are embarking on a journey to make cities inclusive and equitable.
All right. Thank you very much, Titus, for those values and principles and defining for us what inclusivity and equity would then mean for a city. And we pick out the values on dignity, equity and diversity, and the rights and responsibilities. Yes, we emphasize a lot on rights, but rarely do we remember that these rights then come with responsibilities. And the next conversation would be taken up by Jack Campbell, who is the Senior Design Principal and Kenyan citizen leading the design and construction work for KDI in Kenya. So Jack, in in the interest of the definitions that we've been granted, what would you consider, and considering the rapid urbanization and increased population living in the informal settlements, what strategies can we employ to ensure that infrastructure development is inclusive and it reaches to the most vulnerable communities, the ones that have been referred to as the urban invisibles in Kenya? Over to you, Jack.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Titus. I really liked some of the terminology there you used as well, and I'll carry it through. I think, you know, in particular, the organization I work with, KDI, we work in informal settlements, and I think as that introductory video was saying, cities are on the front line of all of these issues that we're facing, and I think potentially nowhere more than informal settlements at that sharp end of these kind of dual challenges of which we have with climate change or climate breakdown, but also at the same time we have this social inequality and social injustice growth actually that we're trying to address. But I think to kind of maybe speak more directly to your answer, I think the important thing is really making sure that local knowledge and the expertise from the ground is central to the process. I think this is something that we have tried to take into our work in a very detailed way, is to bring local knowledge and that expertise and the innovation that exists within community level into how we define what the needs and priorities are for a certain neighborhood or area, not defining those priorities from a boardroom or from what we might have called an expert coming in. So really trying to understand and trying to build that intimate understanding of both communities' needs and priorities, but also their environments as well. I think, of course, there's a big piece here, which is historically that I think we know that the wealthier parts of this city and many other cities are often the parts of the city that receive the most investment again and again. And I think that for real equity to be attained, and actually I think for this whole justice, for just city to be attained, we need to start thinking about how we're allocating budgets and funding towards different neighborhoods in a much more equitable way. Because at the moment, you know, we still seem to be investing in things that prioritize and support wealthy, for one, or those with power. So I think we need to really try to think about, and we can have these conversations in this call as well, to see how we can kind of turn that over, because I think that's a big challenge that we face. So I think that maybe one other thing that I can add is that we have some, you know, I think that within informal settlement upgrading, there are also very similar principles that we find very useful to how to create inclusive and integrated infrastructure, which really link closely to the Just City principles as well that Titus was describing. Rights in the city being one key component, trying to find social and ecological balance in planning, in implementing, in sustaining infrastructure, making sure that all of any infrastructure efforts are collaborative and co-designed, both with city partners, but also with residents and with those who are the experts of the lived experience. I think that, again, and you know, often we're seeing that true safety and resilience factors are not being factored in. Disaster risk reduction strategies are not being factored into some of our urban developments, and those things have to be critical because we're in a rapidly changing climate. Things are becoming very extreme, so we need to be really making sure that we are addressing those challenges. And I think that ultimately that all of these ambitions and these processes, and I think linking the kind of what Titus has already said, and this is that we need to also be thinking and reflecting back on all of the work that we're doing collectively, reviewing, revising, improving for future projects as well. Thanks, Christine.
All right, thank you, Jack. But before I let you go, I would like you to respond to the element of policy and how can we adapt our current policies and practices to more effectively include the residents of informal settlements in decision-making processes, especially with regards to infrastructure development and promoting equity and inclusion. Jack.
Okay, I'll try and do that quickly. So I think we know that there's a need for policy reforms. I think that within informal settlements in particular, there's a need for some of these amazing examples that we've seen, like Makuru Special Planning Area, where by assigning special planning designation on a settlement, we can actually make more custom fit, better fit policies and codes for urban development. Now that's very important for informal settlements, I think, because the context is very unique and very challenging, and we need to have we need there to be special conditions for that. So I think that that's one thing that's already being talked about and pushed on many fronts, and I know that we have other SPAs being assigned and designated around. I think that we have our constitutional rights around participation clearly stated. I think that what's not clear is that those are followed. And I think that there's a two-pronged approach to this, both an advocacy piece to make sure that projects are being more inclusive and participatory in the way that we are setting out for within Constitution. But I would also say, and this is something that we are producing and working with Akiba Mashinani Trust and other partners, which is to make sure, or to try to help residents to also know their rights in a more clear way as well, so that they can also be the advocates for the kind of policy changes that we want to see and to move towards more inclusive decision making. So I think those are really my main 2 points, I think, on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jack, on that. And as we proceed, it would be good to also hear some of the concerns around the informality. And for this, I'd like to invite Tom Courtright, who's a researcher and consultant in transportation and sustainable urbanism in the East African region. His current focus is on borders, the motorcycle taxis, and electrification and urbanism. So, Tom, at this point, I'd like to welcome you to share your experience in the informal transport and currently how does it fit in the urban planning context in Nairobi and in East Africa at large, and what are those issues that probably prevent the effective regulation of the sector? Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, it's a very, very broad segment that we're all thinking about here. And I really appreciate what both Titus and Jack have had to say so far. So from our perspective, you know, I have been living in Uganda and working with a couple of boda drivers who I met who are extremely knowledgeable about the industry, who understand why it is that, you know, they might charge more going one direction than another direction for the same price, for the same distance, and all these sorts of deep nuance that really don't get brought out to the surface, especially when we're working with policymakers whose typical response in the region has been simply to attempt to ban, sometimes to try to carry out various types of registrations or censuses, which rarely really worked their intended effect. There's so much I could go on about here. Every city has its own deep history. So for example, you know, Kampala has the longest history of motorcycle taxis in the region, and since '94. And what's happened in Kampala is that there's a level of saturation now of bodas where if you want to try to carry out a registration exercise, you're dealing with a very deeply entangled web of connections. So associations pop up every couple of months, often have some sort of political patron that they're connected to. That ultimately leads to any registration efforts not working out. Back in 2010, for example, there was a crackdown. You know, in most countries, we have laws that should be supporting safe driving, for example, requiring passengers to wear helmets and requiring drivers to have reflector jackets and being registered and having insurance. This is in the law in every country, basically, in East Africa. And back in 2010 in Uganda, there was a crackdown. They attempted to actually enforce all of these. And what ended up happening is after 2 weeks, the president himself came out and said, well, yes, people do need insurance, but passengers don't need to wear helmets. And after that, that law has never been enforced. And so it's this sort of, you know, vote seeking and political entanglement that really makes this sector a particularly difficult one to manage. And at the same time, in many cases, it was really encouraged early on. I mean, you know, Mwai Kibaki in 2007, lowering import duties in order to bring in motorcycles, leading to the boom in Kenya that we have today. Politicians giving out motorcycles as job creation in Uganda. And today we're like, oh, maybe we have too many. And at this point, it employs over 1 million people in every country in the 3 big countries of East Africa. And so what's happened is, politicians have sort of undermined themselves, frankly, through their attempts to win the votes of this large segment. Another thing that's happened is simply kind of a lack of understanding and a hope that by not including them in any official plans, not including them in the regulatory process, in the process of making the policies that will affect them, I think a lot of folks were hoping they would just disappear. So if you look, you know, if you just search Bodas in the master plans for Nairobi or Dar or Kampala, you'll find 1 or 2 comments simply saying we need to regulate and streamline the sector, and nothing detailed. And whenever there is an attempt at registration that fails and Boda riders complain about this, they find one association who nobody had ever heard of before to sign off of it. And of course, it still is unsuccessful. So, for example, a year ago in Uganda, there was an association here that had this wonderful idea of having reflector jackets that would have people's names on them, a color for which division of the city they were from. It would have a QR code where you could scan that and see who the driver was. You know, this is the sort of thing that can reduce insecurity in the sector, that can actually improve earnings, because of a bit complicated, but thinking about whether you spend time at a stage, how much you're going to charge for that, wasting petrol on the way, et cetera, and you can reduce those losses by moving around. And unfortunately, this idea, once they started onboarding it, the city government here came out and said, oh, you're doing it too early. We don't want to do this yet. And they crushed this, which was a great idea that was coming from Boda riders themselves. So the long story short is that I would say, in addition, quite frankly, it probably doesn't help that because it's such a risky sector, it's very much dominated by young men who we all know are often risk-seeking everywhere in the world. And so that doesn't help. Obviously, we're all aware of the incident that happened in Kenya about a year ago. So this sort of thing keeps bodabodas on the margin. In a city like Nairobi, there's quite a few more alternatives. In cities like Kampala, not so much. In rural Kenya, there's a lot less alternatives as well to bodabodas. And so instead of just attempting to ban them outright, what I would hope is that policymakers would instead look to other post-colonial countries in Southeast Asia who have very successfully regulated them and created more safety in the sector, more security in the sector, more reliability in the sector, Indonesia, Philippines, and the like, instead of simply saying, oh, there's none in London. London doesn't apply to Nairobi, in my view. So that's sort of my broad response to you, which is that there's a lot of back channels through which government is working with bodabodas, as well as, of course, matatus in different ways. And that when there's an attempt to actually regulate them, that attempt is rarely made in coordination with Boda riders and their own associations. And it does so sort of hoping that those back channels won't matter. And so what we're trying to do at Lubyanzi is to trying to bring people to the table and get everybody to speak to each other and bring some of this kind of to light so that we can act realistically and that policymakers can work with Boda riders to improve the sector.
All right, thank you, Thomas, for that. And you refer to it as a risky sector, and you raise the issues of safety, insecurity, and the like. So really, what is the role of border borders in Nairobi, for example, and what can planning do to incorporate them in the economy?
So in a city like Nairobi, they've obviously come to play a large part in deliveries, particularly. But there's a lot of nuanced roles that boda bodas can play that others can't. The straightforward answer is that they're able to do door-to-door trips, including at nighttime, for example, where those are particularly high-value trips. Those are very important. You want to be able to get straight to your door, especially if you're marginalized in any other way. And that is going to be at least twice as expensive if you're trying to do that in a four-wheel vehicle. It always will be, just for technological reasons. Boda bodas also are going to contribute much less to traffic jams. I know how some people love blaming them for traffic jams, but if you look at the reality of how much space they take on the road, it's clearly much less than a car. And they're able to essentially provide emergency services as well as delivery services that cannot be carried out affordably by any other vehicle segment.
All right, thank you for those responses. And I would like to remind our participants that we are together in this conversation. And for that reason, please indicate your questions or your views and comments on the chat boxes and also in the Q&A provision in the Zoom application so that we can be able to engage and have a conversation. At the moment, Michelle Ouma from AAK has posted an informational content that we would like to get more of your thoughts about this session in our concept board. So you can access via the link provided, and then you'd be able to then add a sticky note that gives us your views on particular subsections. And with that, we would like to continue and advance the conversation. And at this point, I would like to speak to Titus on the issue of addressing these systemic inequalities. How can we then have these address the issues of poverty, racism, discrimination? How can we ensure that all residents have access to basic needs and services in our cities? Titus, over to you.
All right, thanks. And I would like to respond to this by giving a practical example of a project that we undertook in Nakuru City. And this basically involves a small informal settlement called the Kenya Meat Commission of about 150 households. And as you know, in informal settlements, they lack basic access to public goods and services, like water sanitation, proper housing, and even public transport. And therefore, the idea was we wanted to disabuse the notion that people who are in the lower cadres of society are not sophisticated enough, are not educated enough to be able to undertake urban planning. So the idea was to showcase that it is actually possible to have people be included in urban planning that would result in equitable outcomes. And in this, we partnered with a technical university of Dresden in Germany. They have a planning tool called the Urban Collective Design, or UCOD. And what it simply does, it takes the area where you live in, translates it into a 3D environment, allows then you to push, pull, drag, drop things where as you would want to see. So if you want security lights, you can drag and put them here. If you want a road here, a social hall, and so forth and so on. And we went to this informal settlement. They donated space in one of their churches. We put up a few laptops. And through virtual training, we trained a few of their youth who then conducted a co-design campaign over a period of a week where any resident could walk in and say, oh, I want my lighting to be here. I want a road to be introduced here. But this is not how it happens in professional planning. So the county government of Nakuru came in with their planners, and their input was simply to say, if you want lights, they must be this distance from each other. And therefore they helped optimize the tool so that when these people are dragging and dropping, they can see, okay, you cannot have more than 2 lights here. Okay, you cannot have this here because some planning guidelines must be followed. The result was a plan that envisioned or captured all their collective wishes or desires into something that can be used by the county government and integrated into their planning systems without them starting again. And now they are discussing how to finance some of the asks that came out of that process. And not only did the result become a plan, but we were able to see clearly from the data analysis what are the top priority issues for these people. And therefore, to answer this question is to say we must dare to dream and also to risk by leveraging technology, the smart aspects of these cities, by having inclusion, by not holding on to what we already know in terms of urban planning or in terms of how projects are done, but by risking to have the people for whom we are building or planning for engage in that process from the beginning. And it is possible to have the civil society, the government, the technical expertise, the built environment professionals execute this together with the people, and the outcomes are more equitable. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Titus, for that testimony on how we can employ social inclusion, allowing the societies to co-create and co-design with us. And then the results are going to be more owned by the community, and the impact is going to be broad and long-term. So at this point, I would like to call in Jack. Jack, you work a lot in the most vulnerable societies in our informal settlements. How can we be able to then enable them to be more climate resilient, because they are the most affected when it comes to climate change, but then they have the least resources in terms of maybe financial capacity, etc. But there's a lot that they hold. There's the local knowledge that they possess. And in essence, if this is leveraged on, then we can be able to see communities that are more resilient. So what other ways do you envisage for enhancement of the climate resilience of these communities? Over to you, Jack.
Thanks, Christine. And yeah, I really like this question, because I actually think that it's got a really clear light at the end of the tunnel moment. So to start with, though, I'll say that, you know, I think as you've kind of alluded to there, that informal settlements are at the kind of the sharp edge, especially as we in predictions of climate change and the impacts that are going to come with that. There's also history at play here. You know, the racist segregation laws of colonial times essentially are the kind of root of many of the informal settlements that we have in Nairobi as well, because those were, and this is the quote, the bad lands. Those lands were assigned to communities and never invested in. And actually, after independence again, there was very little attention paid to those bad lands and so that's kind of at the root of this challenge as well. And you know, I think in terms of looking at informal settlements right now, there's of course a huge challenge in terms of how those neighborhoods transition towards more climate resilience. You know, I and also connected to is that you know they're also kind of often known for the amount of pollution that there is in these settlements. But I would also, you know, I'd say just from the pollution point that in a number of the informal settlements, it's not we've got to move away from this story that it's the residents at fault for that. It's actually our system, it's our city system which is failing them. There is no collection of waste, so it's often that's why it ends up in the river. And that contributes to the risk of flooding, which is going up as the climate changes, because waste gets caught up in the river systems and the waterways, whatever. And I think that we all know that there's multiple dimensions to the risks of flooding as well. But I think that the other part of that is that actually informal settlements and the residents who live within them have incredible social cohesion, are very, very resilient and adaptive to their conditions. And broadly, they have very low carbon footprint. So I think the question is really, how do we transition from an informal settlement to a green, just neighborhood without following the mistakes of the past, where industrial actions or in the industrial approach was taken. So, there's examples for all the forms of infrastructure, but to take one form of infrastructure as an example, stormwater drainage in informal settlements has to, and this is something that we're working on and trying to build evidence around, we have to try and take a different approach to the age-old and redundant philosophy of pushing water out of the system as quickly as possible and into the rivers, which contributes to flooding and increases the risk to downstream neighborhoods. So we've got to try to bring some of the more sustainable urban drainage systems approaches, the green infrastructure approaches into those settlements. And already, that there are a number of different community groups and community organizations based in informal settlements doing incredible work in this. ComGreen for one, but also, all of the different 15 or so community groups that we work with in Kibera, all of them doing amazing, taking amazing initiatives to build a more kind of green resilience within their neighborhood. So yeah, it's definitely a big challenge ahead, but I think that by building the evidence to show how these neighborhoods can be transformed in a different way, following a different typology, the greener approach, we think that this informal settlements could actually become the leading edge of that transition to more green neighborhoods from where we are.
Yes, Jack, we hear you, and thank you so much for that response. Yes, indeed, the informal settlements can become the leaders and champions of climate action and resilience. And at this point where we are talking about the social differences that exhibit themselves or manifest themselves in our cities, I would like to invite a case study to be presented by Joy Mboya, who is the Executive Director of Go Down Arts Center, and with a leading initiative with Her Cities, Her Streets. So Joy, I welcome you to the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christine. And thank you to Jack and Thomas and Titus as well, and listening in on your own experiences and perspectives. I will screen share. Let me just see whether it'll pick it up. Yes, it will. And you just let me know whether you can see the screen.
Yes, we can. Is it possible to expand it? Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yes. Let me expand it and then bring it onto slideshow. Display from the start. Okay, so thank you very much indeed again. I think just listening into the point that Jack made at the end there around how informal settlements could very well be at the sort of vanguard or the leading edge of green transition for the future of our cities, I think is really an important remark. The work that we do is suggested to us, and we come, of course, from the perspective of culture, but it is suggesting to us that that inequities in cities, and really trying to see how to realize these slogans that come out of the conferences and the research and the work that is happening, and it's good work that is happening all around the world, is suggesting a profound change, I think, that I hope we can appreciate in the way that we govern, in the way that we arrange ourselves, and in the way that we make cities and make nation, that it is not a patchwork. And for us, in our experience, that ideal has to be an ethos that is an enduring ethos in your practice. And so we carry this idea of people at the center of processes, not just when we try to put up an exhibition for the enjoyment of the public or a performance, but also when we engage in questions of community, that across all of these people are at the center of that practice and that process. And so the question is, how do we do this? And Her City, Her Streets gave us a chance to really begin to appreciate the dimensions, and really the very rich dimensions of this idea that seems logical to bring people and community into a process. This is a project that we have undertaken with UN Habitat, with architects as well, planning systems, and of course the consultant team that supports them with engineers and so on, but I've also consulted with the city and with the immediate neighborhood. So I'll just take you through arriving at that process and how we did that. So I think for us, as I said, it starts way back. Community has to be mobilized to participate in some way, invited to participate in some way, and you can do it through policy, which is what constitutionally we are also trying to do. And then but then practically, it's how do you forge relationships that bring people into a process. I think we started this about almost 12 years ago now, when in just programming, trying to bring cultural enrichment to the neighborhoods of Nairobi, we became aware that there was a distance between what we were doing and what community was responding to or coming to. And so we challenged ourselves to try and understand culture through the lens of community by creating a framework that would enable them to co-create and basically decide the kind of festival, the kind of celebrations that they might want to enjoy and to share with other neighborhoods in the city. And out of this came this festival that we call Nainihu. So while it is a cultural celebration of the diversity of Nairobi neighborhoods, it also is a framework for beginning to bring people into a co-creation process and to begin to look at these questions that I think Titus raised, questions of identity and belonging and their implications. When I belong, when I identify, I might then begin to build a sense of ownership around something. And when I build a sense of ownership around something, I might then also become confident enough and assured enough that I have agency to change things. And then when I do that, then I am an active and engaged citizen in the things not only of my community, but also beyond my community, because all of these things intersect and connect. So Nainihu then became sort of our sort of moniker of community engagement, community co-creation, and helped us forge relationships with community that brought us to the space of being able to again continue to work with community in a very specific development project around the Go Down. Now this project, what you see on the screen there is a sort of an aerial shot of the railway station area, for those who are familiar with that part of town. To the bottom left over there is Nyayo Stadium, and up towards the kind of top right is the City Stadium. And then the area that has the red circle and the yellow lines kind of T there, that is the Go Down and the two streets that bound it. But as far back as then 2012, 2013, 14, we began to imagine the idea of developing the Go Down, but thinking about its relation to the immediate surroundings that had residential areas, that had industrial areas, and that of course was also very close to the CBD, and to think about what the impact of our development might be, ripple through across all of those neighborhoods around us, but also impacts that might come to us from developments that would be happening from those directions as well. So as we know, the Railway City is one huge development that is proposed for Nairobi. And we have engaged in those conversations because we also wanted to see how to synergize with those developments, that anything that we do has a ripple effect, and how aware can we be around and integrate our developments into others that others are proposing or trying to do around us. The map to the right was really just us mapping the kind of cultural assets, if I can call them that, of the territory that we sit in, the old sort of core of Nairobi, historical, and then of course the neighborhoods around it, to begin to see how we could discuss and locate this as a cultural precinct in some way. So we then, of course, with architects, looked very deliberately at this territory and the road that leads from the Godown. If you look, the purple dots at the bottom there, that road is Dunga Road and Dundori Road. And this is a major sort of thoroughfare that takes you from the informal settlements of Mukuru, South B, all the way up into the CBD, of course, crossing the railway area. And with architects and residents and neighbors immediately around us, the Technical University of Kenya, the railway organization itself, we actually did a walkthrough of this territory and sort of said, if we were to think about this major access, this street that cuts through from the residential area into the business district through the railway station, how might we want to change that so that it is actually a very dynamic and rich connector of the developments that we could see were about to come along it and around it. And of course, the Godown also being one of those developments that we were hoping to be able to execute or implement in the near future. And so this development then of the Godown, I think 2015, 2016, we began to actively think about design. And again, the process of working with people was key and is key. The building itself was designed through a series of back and forth engagements that the architects had with different representations of Godown communities and city communities. And these were residents, these were students, school kids and university kids, these were premised businesses that are our neighbors, these were vendors who populate the streets outside the Godown. These were policymakers who decide the direction of the city, and so on and so forth. So it was an intense and long process that then generated the idea of the physical building, which you see over there. But then, of course, immediately the questions were, how does this link to the street? And how does this link to the idea of the kind of macro studies that we had started to do around the broader axis that takes us into the railway city? So Her City, Her Streets is really this effort to now, again, work with a community to think about the changes, the kind of changes that they would like to see along Dunga Road, Dundori Road, in relation to their own work, their own experiences, and their own sense of how a city works or doesn't work for them. We used a toolkit that comes from UN Habitat, the Her City Toolkit. It's a toolkit that is particular. It centralizes women in the assessments of the street. And in our case, we worked with a diverse range of women, about 30 of them. Some of them were street vendors. Some of them were the daughters of the street vendors. Some of them were young women who came from the neighborhood, who were working in the informal settlements, eking a living from selling things within those settlements. Some of them were students coming from the Technical University, from Nairobi University, and many of these actually were students of the built environment, so that was interesting for us. And we decided to also integrate students from Mariakani Primary School that is up the road from us. So with this toolkit, I think we were able to look at the street across 5 dimensions, and they worked with whatever was comfortable for them. There were phones, which pretty much everybody has, and this was loaded with an app that then helps to, to help respond quickly through the questionnaires, but also to take images that could be easily aggregated at one site once we finish the assessment each week. There were also printed questionnaires for those who were more comfortable with writing, but also there were assistants for those who had challenges with literacy, so that whatever they felt and thought was also captured. And of course, with the kids, we worked with drawing and painting to try and see how they could express themselves in that way as well. And the key thing here was walking through the neighborhood, making stops, assessing, documenting, and then coming back and talking about what we've seen, and then trying to aggregate all of this thinking in a way that then could help this group of young women move to the next phase, which was the ideation phase. I think a key instrument in the ideation phase was now working with Minecraft. And again, this core group, this primary stakeholder group of women and girls were very quick to pick up Minecraft. After just sort of a full day session of walking them through it, the next day they then worked with all of the insights and the challenges and the things that they'd seen in the street to begin to imagine and visualize what they would prefer to see Dunga and Dundori Road become. And so the images that you're seeing on screen right there are some of their visualizations of greening the streets, of making the streets more colorful, of introducing water in the streets, of having playful streets, because again, some of the women who still on the streets have young children who actually join them as they're at work. So how does this public space respond to many of these different needs? And I think listed there just some of the things that came out of their thinking. The next phase then, of course, was to bring the girls together with professional planners, and they worked together to try and see how to interpret the thinking of these girls into something that could then go through a series of validation stages. And here you see, I think it's probably not that clear, but it gives you a sense of the streets designed. I'm trying to just use the cursor. That's Dundori Road, that's Dunga Road, of the landscape architects and the planners beginning to see how to introduce some of the areas that, of course, are missing over here. The question of public washrooms, if you're looking at things to do with comfort and safety, if you're looking at furniture, the question of seating, how to have shared use around parking, how to keep the streets safe with lighting. So things that seem very basic, but again, how do you design in a way that does not exclude this very same stakeholder group at the end of the day, because the street is now much improved. You have a new swanky building, which is the Godan Art Center, and some of these things can be intimidating. So one of the things that we then did with the same stakeholder group was to take them into the CBD and walk them through a Aga Khan walk, which we thought was similar in some ways to some of the ideas that they had suggested, so that they could begin to walk through the kind of change that they were imagining, and to think again about whether it is still inclusive, whether it is intimidating, whether there's still challenges. And indeed there were. I mean, the design does not solve social problems. One of the things that they quickly identified were that security in businesses that feel important is very intimidating for women. So even though it's clean and there's a bench there, your inclination to go and sit there is zero. It is not welcoming. And then, of course, that men very quickly will populate areas that seem to be areas for sitting. And so you didn't see any women sitting in sort of little parklets that might have been created along that walk. And it wasn't until they came to the supermarket area, Uchumi, for those who know Aga Khan walk, that they sort of said, now here I can sit. I can sit on the ledge that is alongside the opposite the entrance to the supermarket, and so on and so forth. And so we discussed again, what are the changes that really need to happen for these spaces to be inclusive, for you to feel welcome, for you to feel that you own them, for you to feel safe. And that design is one element. your participation and your voice and your co-creation is a very key element. But then, of course, there needs to be a mind shift that also happens within community that is important. And then finally, I think just to share that that this designing of the two streets was always taking into cognizance the idea that the city is also being designed by others, that certain roads and certain areas are also changing around us. We're aware that there's the whole BRT development that is projected for Nairobi. And so, you know, at the level of the professionals, there's a question of thinking about how the development of these two streets connect to those proposed bigger changes that will happen with transport. And then, of course, changes that are happening with just developments in that area. Al Futtaim, a big corporate developer who will change significantly the area around the go down, and government buildings that are also coming up near us. There's a lot more building is happening in this area. How will these impact the neighborhood, and how do we remain aware of this even as we're developing our little 1.6 acre site with stretches of road that are less than half a kilometer? How do these things speak to each other? How do these things align with the surrounding developments? And I think I'll stop there. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Joy. That was very exciting to see how planning can be done with, by, and for the people. And looking at the comments that are coming in, and most of them are around how fascinating it is to see that Minecraft, the gamers are here. They're saying that they have only known it as a gaming tool with their children, and themselves, I'm sure they have participated actively in employing the services as a gaming tool. But now they see it as a modeling alternative, and that is wonderful to learn. At this point, I'd like to invite Michelle, because we had a tally with the concept board where the panelists, the participants were invited to give their comments and views on particular topics, and they have been actively contributing. Michelle, would you be ready to share the outputs from the concept notes or the concept board?
Yes, Christine, absolutely. Let me just share my screen shortly.
Okay.
Yes, so in the beginning of the very first session, we shared the screen, this concept note, just to keep the participants engaged on the issues of sustainability and just cities. And in the first question, we had asked what people think about a sustainable and just city, what comes to their mind. So we had a few views over here. There's someone who says no pollution, babies safe as city users, and then we have environmentally friendly, that's reduce, recycle, and reuse, cities that are socially inclusive. Then when asked about what innovative solutions they would implement to address the challenges that Kenyan cities faced, especially the sustainability challenges, one participant suggested that we can create a mobile app with GIS and forms to collect citizen feedbacks and input. And this has come very strongly from our panelists, issues of participation and having everyone on board in the designing of inclusive spaces. Then we also had a suggestion that we should use technology to sensitize the public on the importance of sustainability, and having activities such as car-free days, as well as engage the citizens in such initiatives, at least even once a month, to get the society on board on environmental sensitivity. Then on asked about what we need to prioritize to achieve sustainable and just cities in Kenya, we had a person talking about people planned local development plans, that people need to be included in their local development plans for them to be effective as much as possible. Then finally, when asked about what a sustainable and just city is in their opinion, we had someone saying that a city that is child-friendly, that if you're able to make a city a child-friendly one, then you're able to accommodate each and every person living within that city. So we still invite the participants to share their views on the board. and we'll be able to incorporate all the input in our UTC report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Michelle, for that sharing. Before we get to the final remarks by the panelists, I would like to raise two comments that have been put on the chat box. One is a comment from George Ndege, or a question. I know the Go Down is also fundraising for their project. Maybe Joy can share that if she wishes. May give an indication on matters funding for urban financing or for urban design financing. Joy, any comment on that?
Yes, no, thank you, George, for raising that. Yes, indeed, we are fundraising for this project. The Go Down is a not-for-profit space. It's a public purpose organization, and it operates through grants. And one of the things we try to do is, of course, try and bring the Nairobi on board, Kenya on board, to support the building of this institution that will be for all of us and is for all of us, but also importantly to try and bring government on board. I think that there is a lot of lessons to be learned around how there can be, sort of constructive partnerships between public purpose, independent organizations and government, who are all sort of thinking along the same line, even though they're sitting in different sectors. And so this idea of the Go Down as a flagship for a cultural institution for Nairobi is very exciting to us. The Go Down has been adopted in the CIDP of Nairobi County, which is the County Integrated Development Plan for the next 5 years. We are waiting to see what this means and to understand together what does this mean, because I think it is setting a precedent for the kind of partnerships that can happen across sectors for things that, of course, have a public impact and a public good for all of us. So yes, do go to our website for anybody who's interested in the transformation, and you can understand how to participate and how to be a giver to this initiative as well. And thank you, George, for raising that.
All right, thank you very much, Joy. As we get into the closing remarks, I'd like to invite Tom Courtright as an urban planning practitioner. You can give us your closing remarks and ways in which you believe that inclusion and equity can be a part of the profession and the city as a whole. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So I think something that folks have brought up different ways throughout this really interesting conversation is that, you want to start with residents. You want to start with people who live there. You want to start with people who work there, people who are engaged in the place. We want to avoid parachute in planning, parachute in investments, grants. You want to have a really deeply connected approach to place and space, to communities. So I think just the most important thing is always to start with people, to spend time with people, to understand how they relate to the place, how they move about, how do they spend their day, what is it that they see as being the biggest gaps in their own community, and also, what kind of solutions do they themselves propose, have they themselves tried out, and how can you kind of build with them and really try to first support people in the community to build rather than to fly in solutions from elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Jack Campbell, what would be your closing remarks for this conversation?
Yeah, and I kind of feel like I need to echo what Tom was saying there, and I'll try and say it in a different way and add a little bit more to it. But I think it's exactly that, understanding the reality, which is you can do only really through engaging, getting to know and becoming and getting to know intimately the place and the people who have that lived experience of the situation. Research and really deep understanding of context and of the problem is really critical. And then I think not oversimplifying the solution, because often I feel like we approach solutions with maybe like a very singular objective to build one thing to solve one problem, whereas the reality is you can build one thing or one project that actually meets multiple goals at the same time. And I think that's the way we've got to start thinking, is like that full goal set of what we're trying to do need to be incorporated into the process. And then my final thing would just be to say, I think there's a lot of data out there about climate modeling for how each of our urban environments is going to change over the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And we need to know what those models are saying. They're all in the same direction, but there's extreme versions and less extreme versions. And especially in the built environment, we need to be responding to that now and building towards that now, rather than thinking it's off in the future somewhere, because we're building the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And Titus, what would be your concluding remarks on this?
Yeah, I have two final remarks. One builds on what Jack has just said. We are expecting about 500 million people to move in the to urban areas in Africa by 2050. That just means we need to build about 100 Nairobis. So that shows you the potential, the space for us to really do things differently, so that we have smart, sustainable, and just cities. And this is a challenge that goes out to the policymakers, built environment professionals, civil society, and all others who are urban stakeholders to rethink for whom are we building these cities for? What kind of cities do we want them to be like? And how do we achieve that? And finally, I would say the Go Down project inspired me, and it shows me that I'm not crazy, or we are not crazy, that we can dream and we can actually come up with planning that is citizen-centered and not business-centered. So my parting shot would be, it's good to define our involvement based on either principles or values, and not just pure expertise or what has been done and worked in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Titus. Joy, you have inspired us. Some final remarks from you?
No, thank you all. I think that my co-panelists have been very articulate in expressing the importance of centering people, and to just really underscore the same thing that they've all said, is that people are a reservoir of knowledge and experience. Let us work with community. Let us work with people. We are people. Let's use that resource.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There being no further questions, but still feel free to write in the chat box. I would like to welcome Michelle again, if you can actually just take us through a summary of the session 1 so that we can close out on session 2 and end day 1's conversation under the Urban Thinkers Campus. Michelle, the floor is yours. Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom in this session.
Okay, thank you so much, Christine, for your able leadership all through this the second session of the UTC, as well as our panelists for giving so much insights on these issues of inclusivity in our cities. And this was just a culmination of the discussions that we had in session 1, which we were talking about the issues, the challenges of sustainability and just cities. And we had architect Mugure Njendu, who spoke about inequity in urban areas and how without equity, we can't really achieve resilience. Then there's a very big gap between those who have the services and those who do not have. So how can we ensure that the sustainable transportation, we also provide green energy, and how do we ensure that there's also reliable and safe water and sanitation, and how can urban planning be used to implement or even push further for urban agriculture so that we build more resilient communities. Then we had a speaker, Professor Sarah, who was talking about how data can be used in this process of building sustainable and just cities. And she emphasized on the importance of creating a code of ethics in sharing data and also building that data. And she also emphasized on the importance of ground truthing, where you talk to the people and they clearly know best. They clearly live these conditions and they clearly know what they would want to do. And we also had a very insightful presentation of the Konza City, the progress of what they have been doing. That was done by Marceline, who presented on the horizontal development that they have been able to undertake so far. The construction activities are at 80%. And she really emphasized on how Konza has been keen on inclusivity of all the professionals, where all the professionals who are required within building the smart city have been involved. And also how they are using smart solutions to improve the challenges that are being experienced within our current cities. Issues of water and energy sensors, fire sensors within the wildlife corridor and the nature parks. And then we have had now session 2, where we also had very insightful conversations, and emphasis was on the values of inclusivity and just cities, where we uphold the dignity of the city dwellers, equity and diversity, as well as promote rights and responsibilities to ensure that there is inclusion, not just social, but also economic and even spatial, of all the groups that are living in these cities. Then for justice to be attained, we need to also include all the voices that are concerned within these specific areas that we are focusing on. Then we had the presentation on the Her City, Her Streets project, which has been very insightful. We can see some people asking for the presentations, and we'll be able to share that. And what came out is the importance of co-creating, that everyone has to be on board. The community has to be taking part in the design, as well as advocating for also and including their cultural ideas, and also having everyone, including the girls, the pupils, and the students on board to be able to give their views, their challenges that they face, and ideas on how to improve the city. I'll leave that at that. I would not want to water down what the panelists have presented, but I can assure you that we'll be having a report of all the sessions. We have had rapporteurs for every session, so we'll be able to give more detailed reports of the session. So back to you, Christine, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you for even capturing the discussions very concisely. So I would like to then sum it up as a day one of the Urban Thinkers Campus 8.0 by putting emphasis on what has been said, that the people have to be at the center of it all. I understand in these conversations, we probably have more people from the built environment, built and natural environment, but we may also have people that have joined us from other professions. And what we are advocating for is that essentially we must put the person first as we run by our daily businesses. And at the core of it all, especially as professionals within the built environment, as urban planners, architects, landscape architects, engineers, and the likes, we have to be able to ensure that at the core of urban governance, we have the planning, policy, and design, and that we ensure that our principles and policies are smart, sustainable, and just. And when we speak smart, and you can reckon from the conversation in the morning that smart sometimes appears to be expensive, that it appears to be exclusionary, that people may not be able, for example, to live in Konza City. You remember that was sort of a discussion point in our conversation in session 1. But then we must ensure that even if we are using smart technologies, that we are able to envision how every person from every socioeconomic class can be able to attain and live within that particular space or entity. And again, when we talk sustainability, sometimes we just assume that sustainability and climate action is a government agenda responsibility. But then from the conversation we've had even this in session 2, we realize that sustainability is what you and I do on a daily basis. How do you take care of the waste that you generate from, say, taking a bottle of water, or from unwrapping or unpeeling a banana? How do you take care of that waste? That simple action, day-to-day action, is your contribution to the environment, is how then you work to or against climate. So sustainability is a conversation for each one of us. We have a role, each of us has a role to play. When we speak just cities, and clearly we had the guidance of the principles and values that we employ when we are speaking about justice, then we have to be able to look at the every aspect of the human being. Are we acting in a dignified manner? The kind of housing that people are put up in, is there equity and diversity? Are we ensuring that rights and responsibilities are well catered to? So those have been some of the ideals and conversations that we've had today, and it has been really exciting. Thank you for those that have kept logged in since 12 noon up to this point. We appreciate you, we don't take you for granted, and we're happy to hear more from you. You can access and reach out to the Architectural Association of Kenya through our website. We are ready to respond to any concerns, and has been mentioned that we are going to be sharing the presentations to those that were logged in, and to anybody else that may be interested to catch up with the discussions that have gone on so far. I would like to still welcome you to tomorrow's sessions. We still again start at 12 noon, and we will be delighted to have you on board. We have an action day planned where we are going to be exhibiting some of these technologies and some of these cities that have already been modeled in Kenya and away, and some of the very simple advances in technology and in interventions that are geared towards making our cities smart, sustainable, and just. So we ask you to keep engaged in this conversation, and tune in tomorrow from 12 noon. At this moment, I would like to say thank you very much, and have yourselves a good rest of the day. Feel free to leave at your own pleasure and leisure. Santeni.